Chapter 293, Ming Dong's life experience. The shrine hall was extremely spacious inside, and aside from the throne, there was no other object within the place. Even the foundation pillars couldn't be seen, making Jian Chen wonder just how the roof was being supported. Right in front of the throne was a single white-robed figure whose back was facing them. There was no significant presence to be felt, it seemed as if he was already one with the world. Jian Chen and Ming Dong walked forward until they stopped right before the center of the hall. Cupping their hands, they bowed down to the elder. "We greet the senior." A long exhale could be heard from the elder, but that one breath had a single feeling of emotion to it. Afterward, the man slowly turned around, allowing Jian Chen and Ming Dong to see his appearance. He was a middle-aged man who looked to be around 40 years old with a highly capable look to him. The white-robed man looked at Ming Dong with a strange gaze that seemed to be able to penetrate the fabrics of the world's space and see through time itself without any blemishes. After some time, the middle-aged man sighed once more as his eyes moved from Ming Dong to the highest point of the heavens. 5,000 years. After 5,000 years. Etienne, I've finally found your descendant. I can at last achieve your final wishes. 5,000 years. Hearing that, Jian Chen and Ming Dong both looked on in shock. Could it be that this 40-year-old man was actually a 5,000-year-old eccentric? The words after that weren't heard by the two. As if remembering something from the past, the man let out another breath before smiling at Ming Dong. "Child, come here." Nervously, Ming Dong walked forward at a slow pace before saying, "Senior." Within the empty hand of the man, a dark green-colored jade piece could be seen. The very moment Ming Dong saw the jade piece, his eyes were glued to it. "My child, do you feel a strange sort of calling now, one that causes you to feel that you aren't capable of thinking independently?" The man spoke to Ming Dong with a soft voice. "Yes, senior." Even now, Ming Dong's eyes remained on the jade piece. "This jade piece has remained in my possession for 5,000 years and was given to me by your ancestor. This is the accumulation of his life's work. He told me that one day, if I were to come across one of his descendants, then I should give them this jade piece. Now, I can finally accomplish the final wishes of my old friend." The man's voice grew emotional as he spoke. With a wave of his hand, the jade piece was surrounded by a strange glow of light before floating slowly to Ming Dong. Seeing the floating jade piece, a strong sensation from within Ming Dong's arm could be felt as he felt it suddenly reach out to grab at the jade piece. This control was then broken as he snapped out of it with confusion. Right now, he was feeling something that left him completely mystified. Ming Dong continued to think for a moment in confusion before turning to look at the white-robed man within his voice. "Doubt, Senior, did this piece of jade truly belong to my ancestor? Who even was my ancestor? Is it possible that you found the wrong person? I've never even heard about my ancestors before in my entire life." The middle-aged man sighed once more with a grievance before he muttered, "Etienne, I didn't think that after 5,000 years, your descendants would have forgotten about you." As if heartbroken, the middle-aged man turned to look at Ming Dong. "My child, what is your name?" "Senior, my name is Ming Dong." Ming Dong replied. Ming Dong, A good name." The man thought for a moment before saying, "My child, allow me to tell you just what the situation was like for your Ming family 5,000 years ago." The man went deep into thought before tilting his head up toward the sky as if remembering something. 5,000 years ago, your Ming family was an extremely influential clan. At that time, your Ming family had a single genius. By the age of 30, he was able to make a breakthrough into the Earth Saint Master realm. He is your ancestor, Ming Etienne. Your ancestor and I met by chance, but we quickly became good friends. Together, we formed a mercenary group and experienced many things together. We fought and killed together, fought in multiple battles, and even escaped from dangers together. Your ancestor and I quickly became good friends, inseparable by even death. 100 years later, Ming Etienne and I both advanced to the peak Heaven Saint Master realm. By this point, the both of us grew weary of the mercenary life and secluded ourselves from the mercenary world. We came to this old forest deep within the mountains and left ourselves to the elements to prepare for our ascension. 10 years later, the two of us made breakthroughs to become saint rulers. With that, we toured the continent once more and explored many places while gaining many experiences. Another 10 years passed. Your ancestor and I both gained a huge amount of strength by that point, and so we decided to enter the death nest. Within the death nest, I was about to be hit by a curse. Your ancestor Ming Etian saved me. By sacrificing his body, he took the blow and saved my life. By this point, the man's face turned serious as if trying to hide the grievous look on it. The death nest is the most dangerous place within the Tian Yuan continent. With our saint ruler level, we were unable to protect ourselves. The curse was far too strong, and even with Etien's strength, he was unable to resist the corrosion and died within 2 months. After knowing that his death was near, he was perfectly happy to spend the last few days within the Ming family. What he didn't think was that the moment he would return to the Ming family, everything had changed. The formerly glorious Ming family no longer existed. 30 years before, they had been exterminated by our former enemies while the descendants of the Ming family had all been scattered without a single trace. Because your ancestor and I both disassociated ourselves from the continent without keeping in touch with anyone, we had long since lost any information regarding the Ming family. So after their extermination, we had no idea where they might be. This tragic conclusion caused your ancestor Ming Etian to feel an extreme amount of grief. He didn't think that within the final moments of his life, his own clan would come to a terrible end. Naturally, I had been at his side and knew what he was feeling. With all of this sorrow, it was enough for him to cry tears of blood. After that, Ming Etian and I began to search for the ones responsible for the destruction of the Ming family. Unfortunately, the two of us were not as strong as we used to be and were also just 2 people. Furthermore, we both had many enemies. After 30 years, everyone had already forgotten about the Ming family, causing clues to disappear. In a short 2 months, we were unable to chase down any clues, and there were no survivors that we could find to tell us anything. By now, the man's face had a look of sorrow as he spoke sadly. 2 months after, because of the powerful curse, Ming Etian departed from this world with regret. Before his death, he used his spirit to engrave all of his life experiences within this jade piece before entrusting it to me. He said that one day if I were to come across his future descendant, I was to hand over the jade piece. This was his final wish. Etien's death caused me an endless amount of grief. He and I were friends beyond friends and brothers among brothers. He had even died for my sake, so when he gave me the jade piece, I embarked across the entire Tian Yuan continent in order to search for the ones responsible for the death of his clan as well as the survivors. For 300 long years, I painstakingly eliminated many people that might have been responsible, but there was still no news of the Ming family. To this day, this had been my biggest regret. With a long sigh, he looked back to Ming Dong, but the heavens were kind. Who knew that after 5,000 years, I would be able to come across one of the descendants of the Ming family? If Etienne were to know of this, then he would be able to rest content in death. After listening to the man's tale, Ming Dong was speechless. The man's words were shocking and dealt a great emotional blow that was quite hard to take in. He had never thought that the Ming family would have such a glorious yet tragic story behind it. Even Jian Chen, who was by his side, was shocked. What shocked him even more was the fact that this man was a saint ruler that was over 5,000 years old. This caused Jian Chen to feel a great amount of respect for him. The man walked up to Ming Dong and looked at him like a senior would to his junior. It was also similar to as if he were looking at his own descendant. His eyes were filled with a tender emotion that was far too complex to explain. "My child, you must be here to participate in the gathering of the mercenaries." The man spoke to Ming Dong. Ming Dong could only nod mutely. He had not yet recovered from his shock. "Are your mother and father still alive?" the man asked. "They are. My father and mother both live within a mountain village. My grandfather fell down a cliff and died while hunting." The man sighed in remorse before speaking. After the gathering of the mercenaries is over, please allow me to follow you back to your family. I will look after them in Etienne's place. There is no way I could allow myself to let the descendants of Etienne to live such bitter lives. As his brother, this is unforgivable. I owe him this much. This one thanks the senior. Ming Dong was overjoyed. With this man, an easygoing and fortuitous life for his family would be within his reach. After all, this man was a 5,000-year-old saint ruler and many heaven saint masters would respect him as their lord. With this expert, the life of his family would be smooth going. The sorrowful look on the man's face slowly disappeared as he smiled. My child, your ancestor and I were the best of friends. There is no need to call me senior. If you don't mind, please call me Uncle Tian. Yes, Uncle Tian. Ming Dong cried out respectfully. The man's smile grew warmer as he said, My child, your strength is still quite weak. For now, you should stay with me. I will exhaust all my strength so that I may be able to improve your strength. Whether or not the glorious era of the Ming family returns, that will depend on you. Do not disappoint your ancestor. Chapter 294, Godkiller Ants. Afterward, Ming Dong stayed behind in the shrine, and despite his begging, Jian Chen declined to stay as well. Escorted by two elders, Jian Chen was sent to the space gate and returned to the poisonous cloud-filled mountain range. After reorienting himself, Jian Chen began to walk out of the valley. Just as he was about to exit out from the area, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before heading back to the valley to set up his tent in a secluded area. His plans changed so that he could cultivate in peace for a moment. The valley was quite nice for its environment. It was elegant and quiet. Aside from a few butterflies that fluttered around from flower to flower, there was no other signs of life. All around the valley, the poisonous cloud spread throughout the sky and dyed the area pink. With the pink cloud floating around, no one entered the valley. It was as if the cloud was protecting the mountain range. The toxicity of the poison was extremely strong and none of the competitors were able to make it through into this valley. Furthermore, this place served to hold the space gate that would lead to the shrine. Those who wanted to come to the shrine would need to have the permission of the shrine lord, so Jian Chen felt relaxed. No one would be able to disturb him while he cultivated, so he began to delve deep into a cultivation trance. Within Jian Chen's dantian, the sword spirits continued to revolve around the multicolored stone. A strange amount of energy continued to radiate from the stone and blended in with the sword spirits. They grew larger with each passing second as the light was absorbed by the sword spirits. This process was extremely long, and if one didn't pay attention to the change, then one would never notice it. Within the mountains, Jian Chen spent almost 10 months cultivating. As those few months passed by, Jian Chen spent the time cultivating in his tent and practicing with his sword among the flowers. While his strength did not make an extreme leap, his saint force could not be used in a more efficient manner, increasing his battle strength by several times over. The time before the first round of the competition was about to end in less than 2 months. Jian Chen had been cultivating while waiting for Ming Dong to return, but by this point it was far too late for him to continue waiting. The remaining amount of time had to be spent trying to collect tokens. Arriving at the space gate, he looked at the mysterious array formation on the ground before letting out a single breath. After packing up his things, he left the valley. Jian Chen spent a day observing the array formation on the space gate, but because of the extremely mysterious pattern, he had given up. It contained a complex design and what might seem to be the mysteries of the world. It was almost as if each stroke of the array was pulling at the laws of the world that mystified Jian Chen with his limited comprehension of it. After leaving the small valley, Jian Chen wandered through the poisonous cloud while following the way back to when he had first arrived here with Ming Dong. Because of the poisonous cloud, the mountain was quite barren with very few plant life remaining. Every so often, Jian Chen would come across some poisonous plants, but those were exceptionally rare. As he walked through the mountain range for 2 hours, a rustling sound could be heard coming from the distance in a concentrated amount. Upon hearing the sound, Jian Chen stopped his movements and immediately turned toward the noise with a serious look. Because of the dense clouds, he could see less than 100 meters away. Quickly, a big shadow could be seen within Jian Chen's line of sight. The shadows were like a current, with each different shadow moving along in a stream. Looking at the black figures, Jian Chen's face changed. There was a single thumb-sized ant, and in the air, several other fist-sized ants with wings were quickly flying over. So those are god-killer ants. Jian Chen cried out before running away from them without hesitation. The god-killer ants were well known within the continent. They were a strange race that weren't exactly magical beasts. By itself, a single god-killer ant was not very strong. When they grouped up in large numbers, even a heaven saint master would be surrounded and lose their life. So an earth saint master like Jian Chen would have no chance. God-killer ants were very poisonous creatures and were also immune to the vast majority of poison. Very few would be able to do damage to them, and their outer skin was extremely thick and hard like steel. Anyone lacking in strength wouldn't be able to kill one. Furthermore, these god-killer ants were capable of even swallowing Saint Force. Thus, anyone using Saint Force to protect themselves would be seen as nothing more but a decorational piece to these ants. Jian Chen remembered reading about them within his books. Each one of them agreed that the best way to deal with them was to run away as far as possible. The venom of a god-killer ant had an extremely strong anesthetic effect. The moment one was bit, the venom would circulate around the body and cause one to feel weak. They wouldn't be able to run away and could only wait for the god-killer ants to gnaw away at their bodies until even the bones were gone. In the case one was bitten, then the probability of survival was 0% unless a miracle happened. Jian Chen flew from the mountain range as fast as a wind-fueled fire. He had no wish to fight against the thousands of god-killer ants. From behind, the god-killer ants had already detected Jian Chen's presence and began to give chase. The entire swarm began to migrate toward him in a continuous manner that would raise the hairs of anyone that heard it. In the air, fist-sized winged ants traveled faster than their grounded counterparts and led the chase after Jian Chen at a speed that was far faster than what Jian Chen was traveling at. Jian Chen's speed was at the fastest he could travel. Flying through the mountain range, he tried to go faster, but despite getting a boost in speed after becoming an Earth Saint Master, the precipitous terrain of the mountain was far too uneven for Jian Chen to build up proper speed. This was in no way better than the ants that were flying at him. Not too long after, Jian Chen had been overtaken by a few god-killer ants. Without a choice, he took out his light wind sword and began to strike out at them with several thrusts. With a series of metallic sounds, a large amount of the god-killer ants fell from the skies. Their bodies split in two with black blood spilling out. Because of this delay, several other ants had already surrounded him. Several ants stepped over the dead bodies of their swarm and charged toward Jian Chen without fear. Jian Chen's light wind sword continued to swing outward in a series of intersecting movements that not only halted the advancement of the ants, but slowly carved a way out of the encirclement. Despite this, there were a few god-killer ants that broke through Jian Chen's sword and bit down onto Jian Chen. The sharp teeth of one of the ants tore through Jian Chen's skin that could normally prevent being slashed by a saint weapon like it was tofu. Jian Chen ignored the bite and continued to slash his way out. If he were to stay trapped here, then when more ants were to gather, he would be stuck in a dead end. With a Herculean amount of effort, Jian Chen finally broke free and charged away. His entire body flew out of the valley. At the same time, he raised a hand and completely smashed the head of the ant that had bitten him, causing black blood to splash everywhere. As for the venom that had entered Jian Chen's body after he was bitten, the bloodstream in his body immediately purged away the venom so that it didn't cause him any harm. While the venom of a god-killer ant was scary, it was no use against the venom of the silver-striped golden snake. Close behind, the flying god-killer ants still pursued. Suddenly, just as Jian Chen passed by a small cliffside, a 1-meter-wide hole in the cliff suddenly shot out a red-colored python that flew toward Jian Chen with its mouth wide open. However, with Jian Chen's heightened awareness, he immediately shifted his body to dodge the python. With a raised fist, he smashed it down onto the python's head. The snake fell to the floor with a stunned expression after the blow to the head. Before it could even regain itself, it was quickly surrounded by the ants and was immediately torn apart by dozens of sharp fangs. Hiss! The python cried out in pain before its body began to rip. In the next second, its body flew apart and filled the sky with its pieces. Each piece of the gigantic python was quickly taken by the god-killer ants. Numerous ants swarmed the pieces of the python, and within seconds, the python was picked clean so that even the bones were gone. Not even the spilt blood could be seen anymore. Jian Chen had long since disappeared from this place and escaped to a place outside of the god-killer ants' perception. Outside the area of the poisonous mountains, a group of 20 were gathered there. Pointing at the place, each one began to guess what was inside. I say that there is definitely a treasure inside, but how do we get inside this strange place? A person asked. Just how could a godforsaken place like this have treasure? Besides, that pink mist is definitely poisonous, just who would be able to get in? Such a poisonous mist wouldn't be here for no reason. This place is definitely strange and must hide some sort of secret. Could a strong expert be living here in seclusion? I've heard that a few of the seniors at an expert level would oftentimes install some high-leveled magical beasts and other safeguards so that they can cultivate in peace. So I'm fairly sure this is the case here. I can see your reasoning, but with this type of safeguard in place, the expert here must be a poison expert. I say we should leave this place at once. In the case that we disturb the expert here, then everything will go badly. Bah, how can you say such words? Who says we'll anger the expert or suffer from it? Haven't you heard of the words, a fateful encounter? In the case that this expert is generous, then we could possibly become his disciples and be the carps that have leaped the dragon's gate. In my eyes, this is a monumental chance. The 20 men continued to discuss among each other in front of the poisonous mist and continued to debate about just what could possibly be within. Hey, look! Someone's coming out. Someone's voice rang out. Immediately, everyone turned their heads to look at just who could be running out from the poisonous cloud in such a miserable manner. Chapter 295, Collecting Tokens. That person isn't afraid of the poison. He must have a strong detoxifying pill or even a treasure that grants immunity. Look how weak he looks, he definitely took some blows within the mountains. I bet his strength isn't too strong. Then it's settled. Let's have him hand over his treasure or pill and go inside to check for ourselves. With so many people, we'll definitely reap some profit. The men all cheered in agreement as their faces lit up with excitement. Quickly, the figure came into view. His white robes had been torn apart, in some places blood dyed the white, red. Injuries could be seen everywhere on his young body, which was covered with some black liquid, and everyone could see that this youth couldn't be any older than 20 years old. This man was Jian Chen. After escaping from the poisonous mountain, Jian Chen took in a deep breath of fresh air. He had been chased by the swarm of god-killer ants and was forced into a miserable situation, but he had been fortunate enough to escape. Looking at the 20 men standing some distance away, he calmly took a handful of dirt and wiped at his black-colored hand. Afterward, he took a towel from his space ring and began to wipe at it. That's a space ring. Seeing how Jian Chen took out a towel, a person cried out in shock as he realized just where it had came from. So he has a space ring. The entire group all lit up with excitement and greed as they looked at it with happy smiles. Immediately, a middle-aged man cried out to Jian Chen, "Kid, who are you, and how did you come running out of the poisonous mist here?" Standing up, Jian Chen looked at the group once more. Most of them looked to be around 30 to 40 years old, while their strengths ranged from the Great Saint Master to peak Great Saint Master level. Your question is quite strange. If I was able to enter the place, naturally I would be able to exit from the place. Jian Chen spoke in a carefree manner with a kind smile directed at the group. Not understanding the stare Jian Chen was giving them, the man continued to ask, how were you not afraid of the poison, just what did you use to be immune to it? Jian Chen laughed, it'll be quite inconvenient to tell you. Hearing that, the middle-aged man gave a mutual look toward his friends. With a wave of his hands, the entire group surrounded Jian Chen. Kid, I don't wish to harm you, just hand over your space ring and tell us just how you were able to be immune to the poison. Then we'll let you go. The man ordered. That's right, we are not ones for unnecessary slaughter. Seeing how you're this young, you still have a long life ahead of you. Just hand over your space ring obediently and tell us how you avoided being poisoned. A thin-looking man said. Kid, seeing how unblemished your skin is, you must not be accustomed to pain. Be a good boy and tell us what we need to know. Otherwise your handsome face will be no more. Then, don't blame us for not being able to find a nice lady. Another fierce-looking person said in a muffled voice. Although his words were straightforward, there was a sense of humor to them. Jian Chen smiled at the group, seeing how you don't seem to be such bad people, I won't shame you. Hand over your tokens and I will guarantee that I will not hurt you. These words caused the group to be stunned. Everyone began to roar with laughter as one of them said, how arrogant this child is, everyone come and shame him. Allow me. A large man volunteered as he walked forward to raise a fist at Jian Chen. Seeing the incoming fist, Jian Chen shook his head before bringing up his right hand to grab at the fist. With a small amount of power, the sounds of bones breaking could be heard as Jian Chen started to crush the man's hand. Ah! Let go. You're hurting me. The man cried out in pain as he tried to tug away. This sight caused the other men to be shocked as their faces slowly grew serious. How fucking blind we are to miss that this kid is quite talented. Brothers, get him. At this, the rest of the men took out their saint weapons to attack. Jian Chen extended 2 fingers and had some sword chi shoot straight out of them, reaching a foot in length. With a faint light, the sword chi flickered once before disappearing from view. Within a single second, Jian Chen had moved around each member at least once. As soon as he reappeared, the clothes of the men all instantly turned into cloth strips. In an instant, the neat and orderly clothes fell in piles beneath their feet and revealed their bodies without a single scratch. The 20 men were stunned. Staring blankly at the destroyed remains of their clothes, they all looked at Jian Chen in utter shock. Everyone, it would be in your best interest to hand over your tokens. Jian Chen stood close by with a stunning smile directed at everyone. Why you? You're an Earth Saint Master. A man cried out in terror. There was a tone of utter disbelief in his voice as he asked to confirm his question. Hearing him, the other men all grew terrified as their eyes widened. They truly couldn't believe that this 20-year-old youth in front of them was somehow an expert of the Earth Saint Master level. Fuck. How unfortunate. To think that the first youth we see is actually an Earth Saint Master. How the heavens have forsaken us. A man sighed before throwing down his space belt at Jian Chen. The tokens are in there, I'm afraid that you will think we're hiding something, so feel free to look for yourself. After that the other men also threw down their space belts with some hesitation. With a heavy heart and a crestfallen look, they looked down in despair, an opposite reaction to what they had before. With that, Jian Chen took out the tokens and began to count them all. In total there were around 150 tokens. Without touching any of the other items, he handed back the space belts and left the place. The entire plains were filled with past battles. Dead corpses could be seen everywhere as Jian Chen wandered through the entire place. In the past, he was able to easily grab tokens, but now that this round of the competition was coming to an end, practically all the tokens were within the hands of a few experts or a group of strong great saint masters. Those who were traveling by themselves or with a small group had their entire collection of tokens taken away already. 2 days later, while Jian Chen saw many people, the profits were not that good. In total, he had only gained another 100 tokens. Although now he was emptying the space belts of everything else but food and clothes. Walking to a desolate area, Jian Chen saw over 200 men fighting against each other. The battle seemed extraordinarily fierce and many people were already on the floor dying within their blood. After some time, the battle began to die down as 20 men remained. All of them were injured and had blood flowing down their bodies constantly. The 20 all belonged to the same group and began to clean up their wounds. A few of the more able-bodied men began to clean up the battleground to find some tokens. After the token collections were finished, the able-bodied men looked at each other and nodded. Straight away, they flew at the injured comrades and slashed at them. The brethren who had been fighting at their sides grew startled before falling to the ground after being slashed. How could you be this way? The one who had his heart stabbed immediately looked at the other man with disbelief. You've already sustained heavy injuries. You're not long for this world, I'm only hastening your journey there and saving you the suffering. One of them spoke. You'll receive judgment for this. As he spat out these words, he fell to the floor dead. Afterward, the survivors took the tokens from his dead body and left the area. Just as these men were about to leave, a white-robed youth suddenly appeared out of nowhere and blocked their paths. This person was Jian Chen. Fellow brothers, how merciless you are. For the sake of a few tokens, you were willing to kill a friend that fought alongside you. Jian Chen spoke calmly without a single emotion in his voice. Who are you? Seeing Jian Chen appear, everyone instantly went alert before grabbing their saint weapons as they stared at him menacingly. Your killer. Jian Chen immediately lifted his arm as a 2-foot-long blade of sword qi shot from his fingers. In a flash, he flew toward the men and began to slash at their necks. Some of them were great saint masters and were completely unable to keep track of Jian Chen's movements. By the time their necks had been slashed, they could only fall to the ground in shock. Walking up to the dead corpses, Jian Chen counted a total of over 200 tokens within their space belts. This was much better than yesterday's harvest. Suddenly, the dirt all around Jian Chen sprung up to envelop him, blocking his sight. An unknown figure with Earth Saint force all over his body shot out with his blade shining in the light as it slashed down toward Jian Chen's head. With a snort, Jian Chen closed his eyes so that the sand wouldn't get into them. The light wind sword immediately appeared in his hand and carved a way out in a single stroke. Ding! With the earth flying everywhere, Jian Chen's light wind sword made contact with the enemy's sword with a loud clanging sound. Chapter 296, Ballistas. Seeing his sword meet resistance, the enemy cried out in shock before bringing back his sword once more to slash at Jian Chen. Jian Chen's sword disappeared again in a flicker of movement, allowing the other person could only hear the sounds of a sword being rapidly thrust at him. Despite the earth blocking his vision, with his strength, it was not too influential on his fighting ability. In a flash, Jian Chen and the man had exchanged several blows before taking advantage of the man's opening to thrust his sword forward with lightning speed toward his throat. The sword was far too fast, and in an instant it was already right in front of the man's eyes. The strong amount of sword qi flicking off the tip of the sword was already starting to bite into his throat. The man cried out startled, but with his strong strength, right on the verge of his own death, he quickly brought his saint weapon back. Bringing it across his neck to protect it, he simultaneously kicked Jian Chen back. The light wind sword stabbed into the man's sword and left a deep dent in it while Jian Chen's left hand smashed against the man's leg with a fierce amount of saint force. Kacha! The sounds of bones breaking could be heard as the man's leg instantly fractured. Straight away, the force of the blow sent the man flying backward away from Jian Chen. Jian Chen took the opportunity to leap out of the earthen enclosure and stared at his attacker. He noticed that the man was a brown-robed middle-aged man with a relatively small build but had fierce eyes. He had a long beard and a sword that was almost as long as he was tall. Jian Chen stared coldly at the man. At what time does an Earth Saint Master have to attack someone from behind as a sneak attack? Hearing this, the middle-aged man snorted, don't be so righteous. This is a survival of the fittest, whomever gets the final victory is the winner, damned be how he does it. The man stared at Jian Chen and spoke, "Kid, you don't look that old, but your strength is unbelievable. So young, yet already an Earth Saint Master. Thank you for your praise." Jian Chen smiled. "Now do you wish to hand over your tokens, or shall I take them from you?" "How impudent for you to want to take my tokens. Let's see if you have the strength to do so." The man snorted before waving his sword in preparation to fight once more. At the same time, a large amount of Earth-attributed Saint force began to condense over his body like armor, giving him a much stronger form of defense. Jian Chen's sword was unbelievably fast. In a moment, a single sword strike could be seen in various angles. Each shadow image was incredibly hard to differentiate from fake to real. Right now, under Jian Chen's attacks, the middle-aged man barely had any time to breathe. Desperately retreating backward, his body was filled with sword cuts. As his Earth-attributed Saint force armor had almost been destroyed, he would not be able to last any longer. The man was dumbstruck now. He didn't think that Jian Chen would be this strong even though he was an Earth Saint Master. Despite them being at the same level of strength, he wasn't able to fight against him at all, especially against Jian Chen's sword. The sword was almost far too fast for him to react against, and the amount of mirror images from the sword already left him in a daze. Knowing that he was outmatched, he gave up his will to fight. Leaping away from background, he melted into the ground out of sight as a means to escape. This strange move of the man had caused Jian Chen to be stunned. Seeing just how the man disappeared from sight into the ground, Jian Chen had been astonished. This was the very first time he had seen such an escape method. The man's escape technique didn't render him completely intangible. With every single movement he took, a small pile of dirt could be seen rising up. Anyone with sharp enough eyes would be able to detect it. Smirking slightly, Jian Chen leaped 30 meters forward into the air and then brought down his shining light wind sword onto a small packet of dirt with lightning speed. PCH. As the sword slammed into the ground, a large fountain of blood sprayed into the air. Jian Chen's sword chi had somehow pierced into the middle-aged man. The man didn't have time to be shocked. Trying to move faster to escape now, he learned from his mistakes and dove deeper into the ground where it would be impossible to detect him. While Jian Chen was unable to fly in the air, he could at the very least hover in the skies for a small amount of time at the cost of a large amount of Saint force. Floating 30 meters in the air, his cold eyes stared down at the ground looking for any possible direction the man may have escaped in. With the man diving deep underground, it was impossible for Jian Chen to detect him. A split second later, a small patch of grass shook slightly. With a start, Jian Chen immediately stabbed downward with no hesitation as the sword chi from his sword began to cover the area. The sword chi flooded the area like water in a bucket and began to slash apart the entire area. "You bastard, don't be too excessive." The man cried out as he leaped out from the ground with blood all over his body. Descending to the ground, Jian Chen charged at the man without another word. The middle-aged man had launched a sneak attack on him earlier, and if it weren't for the fact that the man wasn't that strong, then his blade would have killed Jian Chen and left him a lifeless being. Furthermore, the middle-aged man was an Earth Saint Master who had been acting with prudence. With over 10 months gone, this man must have collected plenty of tokens, which was what Jian Chen wanted. "Fuck, you bastard, I'll remember this day. I'll return this favor back to you 100-fold. The man swore angrily. Without hesitation, he dove back down underground and out of sight. "Where do you think you're going?" Jian Chen spoke. With some difficulty, he forced the man out from underground once more with his sword. Jian Chen's sword danced in his hand as a strong amount of sword chi flew toward the man to strike him. Dirt flew into the air as a spurt of blood shot out from underground. While the man was using this underground technique to escape, he couldn't go too deep and his movements were still visible. It was so noticeable for Jian Chen that he was able to land such a blow. Once again, the man was forced up from the ground. Without a single chance to catch his breath, Jian Chen's sword chi instantly shrouded the area where the middle-aged man stood. The man tried to brace himself for the worst, but with his heavy injuries, he was extremely slow. Now that he wasn't as nimble as before, he could only defend against 2 sword strikes before ultimately getting a 3rd sword strike through his shoulder. Stifling a pain-filled shout, his face twitched erratically in response to the injury. At that moment, the 4th strike came at him. With panic, the man dodged to the side, causing the sword to pass by his neck without a problem. However, before the man could react, the sword shifted toward his neck and slashed it. PCH. Another pillar of blood shot into the air as the man's head was cut, causing blood to fly everywhere. Taking the space belt from the man, Jian Chen counted a grand total of 400 tokens. Other than that, there were also a single purple card, 3 Class 4 monster cores, and several hundred purple coins. This was an extremely bountiful harvest. After collecting everything, Jian Chen left the area. Sauntering about the plains, Jian Chen continued to collect tokens on his journey, but things weren't as profitable as they were when he had taken the tokens from the short man last time. After 3 days of traveling, Jian Chen had amassed around 500 tokens. Although he had came across countless of competitors, all of their tokens had already been taken by someone and they had been left with only the bare essentials to live. 3 days later, Jian Chen had crossed the plains only to arrive at a vast grassland. Each blade of grass was roughly half as tall as a person, making anything below the waist hard to see. In the grass, there were countless of hidden vipers. There were even some vipers around a meter wide with poisons so potent, they could kill a great Saint Master in 4 hours. They were by nature very secretive, concealed in the grass without moving, they wouldn't even emit a single sound. With the support of the grass, no one would be able to detect that these vipers were there. Occasionally, Jian Chen's leg would feel a small nip, but it was inherently useless. The 1000 immunity he had rendered him immune to the venom. At this moment, a sharp stinging sound could be heard whistling through the air. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed coldly as the light wind sword appeared to block the incoming strike. Clang! A strong shock could be felt running through Jian Chen's arm as it went numb. Glancing at what struck him, he could see a single black crossbolt made of pure steel forged in a unique way to make it even harder. Whoosh! Another whistling sound could be heard. A single arm-sized crossbolt flew out from the grass and toward Jian Chen. Jian Chen's light wind sword danced in the air as it struck against the crossbolt, causing yet another vibration to travel up Jian Chen's arm and numb it. After blocking the crossbolt, Jian Chen leaped into the air and flew across the tip of the grass in the direction the crossbolts were shot from. During that time, the crossbolts continued to fire at Jian Chen. Jian Chen would dodge each shot without blocking a single one. On the way, there had been a total of 10 crossbolts that Jian Chen was forced to knock away and 20 crossbolts he had dodged successfully. Quickly, Jian Chen arrived at where the crossbolts were being shot at only to see 3 ballistas hidden within the grass while 5 middle-aged men continued to scramble about to refill the ballistas with ammunition. Jian Chen had seen these types of ballistas before in Wake City. These were quite high quality. The force a ballista could shoot out a crossbolt at was quite strong and could penetrate through several Class 2 magical beasts with a single shot. These were even capable of killing a Class 4 magical beast, and even a great Saint Master wouldn't be able to knock aside a crossbolt shot from one of these. However, what Jian Chen couldn't imagine was how these men managed to bring these contraptions into this place. Chapter 297, Great Fight. Seeing how Jian Chen hadn't been hit and was instead getting closer and closer despite the crossbolts, the men resupplying the ballistas immediately grew startled. Crap, this is an Earth Saint Master, let's get out of here. One of the men cried out at the others. Abandoning the 3 ballistas, they all scampered away in separate directions so that Jian Chen wouldn't be able to get them all at once, thus increasing their chances of surviving. Only an Earth Saint Master would be able to make their way through an endless barrage of crossbow bolts. With a cold sneer on his face, Jian Chen concentrated his sword qi to extend out from 2 of his fingers. The sword qi shot out from his fingers and flew at one of the men like a streak of lightning, before striking him straight through the throat and leaving a cavity behind. Jian Chen shot another 4 bursts of sword chi out at the men who were all running away from him. Slowly, their bodies fell to the ground, allowing Jian Chen to inspect their space belts. Afterwards, Jian Chen happily collected 30 tokens from the 5 of them with a satisfied expression on his face. For 5 great Saint Masters to be able to collect 30 tokens was an incredibly difficult task at this point. Seeing how they were able to kill countless people within this hidden area with the ballistas, the chances of anyone with the power of a great Saint Master and below surviving was a low 1%. By the second day, Jian Chen had finally made it through the grasslands, only to come across the footprints of a large group of people. Looking at their tracks, Jian Chen could estimate that there were about 100 people, truly not a small group. Jian Chen began to follow their tracks only to come across a precipitous mountain range. The mountain was barren with no traces of grass. The highest peak of the mountain was like a sword that speared into the blue sky, and seemed extremely perilous to climb. Observing the tracks once more, Jian Chen began to climb up the mountain range. The moment he started to climb, Jian Chen could hear the faint sounds of battle from farther away. Surveying the area, Jian Chen could only see several shelters within the mountainside, but he couldn't see where exactly the fight was taking place. The sound was reverberating all over the area, making it too difficult to pinpoint the origin. Still taking in what was around him, Jian Chen's eyes finally landed on a 50-meter tall mountain peak. With a sudden leap forward, Jian Chen began to travel there. At the top of the peak, Jian Chen could suddenly see a large group of people fighting 5 kilometers away. At the front of one group was a single, azure-robed man weaving through the group of enemies so fast that they weren't able to even touch his clothes. With each strike from him, his enemies fell to the ground dead. Jian Chen's eyes flashed several times as he watched the man fight. The man seemed to be a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master who was killing hundreds of great Saint Masters with ease. The battle continued for some time, until less than 20 great Saint Masters remained. Those survivors knew they were no match for him and lost their wills to fight. Throwing down their space belts, they instantly fled in every direction. Instead of chasing them, the Earth Saint Masters began to collect all of the tokens within the space belts. Abruptly, Jian Chen leaped down from the 50-meter peak towards the man. Suddenly detecting the presence of Jian Chen as he approached, the man could tell right away that this new person was an expert of a high level. With that feeling, the man began to collect the tokens at an even faster rate. Rapidly descending down the peak, Jian Chen flew toward the middle-aged man. Within a few moments, he had traversed the 5 kilometers, and he rapidly stabbed at the middle-aged man with his sword. Unable to clean up the rest of the space belts, the man brought out his long sword and enhanced it with his Wind Saint force before slashing at Jian Chen. The 2 saint weapons made contact with each other, causing a strong shockwave to emerge from the collision. This shockwave was so strong that a spiderweb of cracks began to appear beneath their feet. With that one strike, Jian Chen's foot struck out at the middle-aged man. Jian Chen's light wind sword shone with a hazy glow as he slashed at the man 3 times. The gleam in the man's eyes intensified as he shouted, "What an exquisite sword technique!" With his own sword that began to glow, he blocked Jian Chen's sword. With the Wind Saint force, the man's speed was no slower than Jian Chen's. The rapid movements of the 2 fighters and their swords began to crack the nearby rocks and even the ground, as a strong gale began to kick up. The sword in Jian Chen's hand traveled faster and faster as his swordplay began to grow stranger and stranger. This rapid change of movements caused even the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master to feel a great strain as he blocked the sword that slowly forced him to a greater disadvantage. With each strike, the man's face grew more serious. He hadn't thought that he would meet such a young and strong individual today. Despite Jian Chen's age, he could already pressure a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master to a devastating degree. Suddenly, Jian Chen's sword blurred, immediately transforming into several mirror images that were so numerous they covered the sky and entrapped the man within. With a grave expression, the man flew backwards as the sword in his hand began to glow with a cyan light. He pointed his sword up at the sky and cried out, "Wind burst." The cyan light on the sword scattered into thousands of pieces before melting away into the air. Suddenly, the area around them erupted as stones began to float into the air before forming a giant tornado with Jian Chen at the center. As if suddenly weighed down by a great restriction, Jian Chen felt the tornado pull at his body from every direction as it tried to blow him into the air. However, Jian Chen firmly planted himself to the ground and did not budge from his spot. Although he was suffering from the suction of the tornado, Jian Chen forced himself to stay down on the ground. If either of his legs were to give way, then his entire body would be sent flying into the sky. The man's sword dazzled in the light. With the sword still held straight upwards, he cried out once more, "Squall dance!" With that command, the squall flew faster, almost as if each blade of wind was a sword that cut into Jian Chen's body. His clothes were already being slashed apart, and the tiniest of cuts could be seen on his body already. Blood began to flow out from his body and into the air. Jian Chen's face grew solemn as he saw the wounds appear. This man's strength was beyond what he'd expected. This man could be said to be the strongest Earth Saint Master he had seen so far. Ah! Suddenly, Jian Chen roared at the sky with a grand voice that could be heard by anyone within a 10-mile distance. His saint force burst out of his body. With an extreme amount of effort from his legs, he flew out of the tornado so fast the ground beneath him fractured. He pointed the gleaming light wind sword in his hand at the man. There was a frightened look on the man's face. He hadn't expected Jian Chen to run out of the tornado, but with some difficulty, he held his sword perpendicular to Jian Chen's sword. Clang! The two saint weapons smashed together and caused another ripple of energy to fly out, causing Jian Chen to retreat back a few steps. A bright azure and violet glow appeared around his light wind sword. With a flourish, a violet and azure-colored sword chi flew from the sword like lightning towards the middle-aged man. The man clenched his sword close to him. In the short moment the sword chi and his sword met, a hole could be seen in the middle of the sword. The man shook as a guttural groan rose from his throat and his face began to whiten. How is this possible? The man cried out as he looked at the hole in his sword with wide eyes full of disbelief. Jian Chen didn't stop to answer him. Brandishing his sword, the azure and violet sword chi flew at the man once more. His opponent looked at the azure and violet sword chi with a startled look. He knew by now that he couldn't block it and could only dodge the attack. Sliding forward, Jian Chen thrust his light wind sword towards the man. This man was not only strong, but he also had two battle skills, making him quite difficult to handle. If it weren't for the azure and violet sword chi, Jian Chen would have been incapable of killing him. With his sharp eyes, the man looked at Jian Chen's sword where he saw the faint glow of the azure and violet sword chi, instantly drawing the connection between that and the sword chi that had struck his saint weapon. The man knew that he was no match now. Without delay, the man immediately turned to flee and instantly disappeared from view. Seeing the man leave, Jian Chen let out a breath of air. The man was a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master, so if he wanted to leave, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to capture him. Jian Chen began to feel some regret in his heart. He had originally thought that he would be able to get a nice profit since this man was extremely strong and vigilant. The moment his opponent saw the sword chi, he immediately fled from Jian Chen, who could only look on in dismay. Jian Chen looked at the rest of the corpses with some hesitation before shifting his gaze towards the remaining space belts. In total, there were about 30 tokens. If the man hadn't taken the rest of the tokens, then Jian Chen's profits would likely have been much higher. Afterwards, Jian Chen continued on towards the mountains in search of prey. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound could be heard from far away as a giant fireball appeared out of nowhere and flew at Jian Chen. Chapter 298. The yellow-clothed girl. Seeing the giant fireball flying through the air at him, Jian Chen could only stare in shock, but quickly, he brought himself back to his senses and leaped out of the way. Bang! An ear-deafening sound could be heard as the fireball exploded where Jian Chen used to be standing. The crater left behind was approximately 3 meters wide and had split the entire ground near it while burning up everything in the impact zone. Seeing just how large the crater was, Jian Chen's eyes widened before muttering with a shocked look, This is what the impact zone of a magical crystal cannon would look like. Several seconds later, another boom could be heard as another fireball from a few kilometers away shot toward him from a nearby mountain peak. Jian Chen locked onto the peak where the fireball was shot from and immediately headed over there. In a flash, Jian Chen had reached the area and began to climb the peak to the top. The peak wasn't all that large and only had a circumference of 10 meters. Mounted on top of one of the 5-meter holes was a single pitch-dark magical crystal cannon with a 30-year-old youth facing downward. His eyes swept across the ground below for a target, but the manner in which he was doing so made him seem like a thief, making for a comical sight. When Jian Chen saw the magical crystal cannon, he had to resist the urge to sigh. He didn't think that the fireball shot at him was from a magical crystal cannon. In this gathering of the mercenaries, there had really been someone that brought a magical crystal cannon. At that moment, the youth had realized something was amiss behind him. Turning violently, he grew startled as he saw just how young Jian Chen was, but what shocked him even more was just how silent he was, sneaking up behind him as if he wasn't there in the first place. Without hesitating, the youth decided to run down the peak of the mountain in an attempt to run away. Flickering away from sight, Jian Chen instantly appeared by the youth's side. Grabbing onto the clothes of the youth, he brought him into the air before throwing him back down to the ground. "Don't kill me, I'll give you my token." The youth had lost all hope in running away and began to beg for his life with a frantic voice. Jian Chen stood by the edge of the hole where he threw the youth and spoke at him from above, "What is your name?" I'm called Jacob," the youth replied. Jian Chen looked at the giant cannon still perched on the top before looking at Jacob. "You know how to install a magical crystal cannon?" "Why, yes. I've learned how to since I was small. Every single important component of the cannon I'm very familiar with. Even with my eyes closed I'd be able to assemble a magical crystal cannon straight away." Jacob stammered out. A happy smile appeared on Jian Chen's face. "Do you wish to live?" "I do." "Great swordsman, please let me go, I'll give up anything on me in exchange." Jacob pleaded with him almost in tears. Jian Chen leaped down the hole and brought out a giant steel box from within his space ring, causing the hole to feel slightly cramped. Jian Chen pointed at the box, "If you are able to show me how to assemble the essential parts, then I will let you go. Furthermore, I'll even give you a reward for it." At this, the youth had a joyful look that held a small hint of disbelief as he looked at the fantastical steel box. This is the pedestal of the cannon," Jacob muttered as he looked at the part. After hearing Jacob's words of this item, Jian Chen let out a sigh in relief. The advanced tier magical crystal cannon part had only been in his possession for a short amount of time. Unfortunately, he had been unable to figure out how to assemble it and it could only serve as garbage as it was now. This was finally a chance for him to assemble the cannon. Jian Chen could feel excitement at this since this was a powerful weapon of destruction capable of killing an Earth Saint Master. Although he was already an Earth Saint Master that could fight other ones without any significant trouble, this advanced tier magical crystal cannon would still serve some use. "Open it up and see if it can be assembled. I hope that you won't disappoint me." Jian Chen spoke up from the side. "As long as it is a magical crystal cannon, then it will be no problem for me. Whatever defect or problem it has, I can fix." Jacob spoke with great confidence in himself as he turned to open the steel box and reveal the items within it. After opening one of the boxes, he could see that the materials used to construct this cannon were quite different. With an astonished cry, he spoke with shock, "This is an advanced tier magical crystal cannon. Good heavens, this type of cannon can fire up to 20 kilometers away and kill an Earth Saint Master. Am I going blind? This type of magical crystal cannon is something multiple countries would fight over and would spend a lot of money to buy one for themselves. Hurry up and assemble it for me. The sooner you do so, the sooner you can leave." Jian Chen spoke impatiently. Yes, yes. I'll get on it right away. It was only now that Jacob remembered that his life was still in danger. Straight away, Jacob began to move both of his hands as he quickly assembled the pieces. In an hour, he had assembled and disassembled the cannon 3 times for Jian Chen to take notes and study. Although a regular cannon had nearly 1,000 pieces to it, with Jian Chen's intellect and cognitive ability, he was able to remember everything. An advanced-tier magical crystal cannon was even larger than the cannon from before. If fastened to the same place, then it would take a whole 10 meters. Taking out a Class 5 monster core from his space belt, he spoke out happily, "Let me test out the strength of this cannon." Jacob spoke with a painful look, "An advanced-tier magical crystal cannon has no room for doubt. Using a single Class 5 monster core would be a waste, you should try to save those." Afterward, the energy continued to flow from the monster core into the cannon. Slowly, the cannon began to prepare to fire as an explosive amount of energy began to flow out of the cannon, giving everyone a dangerous vibe. Jacob and Jian Chen stood to the side and watched the cannon suddenly shoot out a single burst of energy without any harm to them. Bang! Once it was done charging, the sounds of cannon fire could be heard as the cannon began to fire. Both people could only see a shining ball of light shoot out of the cannon before flying into the sky before finally landing on top of a nearby mountain peak. Bang! From far away, Jian Chen could feel a disturbance in the air. Smoke filled the air as the peak that had been fired at began to crumble away with large rocks and a crumbling sound. As for the sky above, there was a giant mushroom right above that shocked anyone that saw it. Half a moment later, Jian Chen slowly set out toward the peak only to discover that the top part of the peak had been obliterated without a single piece left behind. This is the power of an advanced-tier magical crystal cannon. How astonishing, it is no wonder that this is a weapon that can kill even Earth Saint Masters. Jacob spoke to Jian Chen with a look of astonishment. Even Jian Chen had been intimidated by the power of the cannons. With this, not only could he kill an Earth Saint Master, but even Class 5 magical beasts. If the power of a cannon was truly as strong as they say, then even an Earth Saint Master would not be as terrifying to deal with if this cannon was used. Jian Chen took out a few Class 4 monster cores and handed them to Jacob. "You may go, these are for you." Jacob took the items gratefully before leaving quickly. Seeing how hurriedly he was traveling, it seemed as if he was worried Jian Chen might renege on his promise. Jian Chen sighed before looking at the cannon with him before finally looking at the useless parts of the cannon. After Jian Chen had disassembled the cannon and stored it in his space ring, he could suddenly detect some movement with his ears. With the light wind sword appearing in his hands, he instantly stabbed behind him. Bang! A loud explosive sound could be heard the instant Jian Chen had acted. Clenching onto his sword, Jian Chen was sent flying back before coughing up some blood. His entire body felt mushy now. Although he had originally been on a mountain, he had no idea where he was at now. Jian Chen's light wind sword fell down behind him as he let out another hack of blood. His eyes stared wide away only to discover that 3 kilometers away on another peak, there was a yellow-robed person. Since the distance was too far, he couldn't see his appearance clearly. Jian Chen could only feel shock in his heart now. The opponent was far too strong. In a single blow, he had suffered a great deal of damage, and that was when attacked from 3 kilometers away. Jian Chen immediately leaped down from the peak and began to look for shelter on the ground below. A large voice could be heard coming toward Jian Chen. Using the terrain to hide himself and his tracks, he could hear just where the other person was at. Then, leaping out from his spot, he began to charge at his target. However, the man had been anticipating Jian Chen's surprise attack. A single sword around 4 meters long had instantly appeared in his hands with a light blue color. The sword rippled with light that resembled that of a water ripple before surging with saint force. The yellow-robed person held his sword perpendicular to Jian Chen's. In an instant, the two charged to exchange several blows before retreating. Despite growing paler with each exchange, he could feel himself standing tall without yielding. His right hand held his weapon, which he pointed toward the yellow-robed figure. Just as Jian Chen saw the person's appearance, a cold glare returned the strange look on Jian Chen's face. The yellow-robed person was actually a 20-year-old lady with an appearance that could rival the immortals. Her long black hair danced in the wind behind her, but did nothing to hide the amazingly cold glare within her eyes that brimmed with intelligence. Even her eyebrows had a feeling of elegance to them. On the back of the woman was a 2-meter long bow made of gold that was giving off a golden shine, making it seem quite unordinary. Seeing this lady, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed as he revealed a thoughtful look. He didn't know why, but he had felt a feeling of familiarity when he saw her. It was almost as if he had seen her before from somewhere, but he didn't know where. The other woman stared coldly at Jian Chen. Then, in a split second, her pupils suddenly dilated as her face underwent a change. With shock, she looked at Jian Chen's face closely before giving off an enraged aura. So it's you. You're that smelly rogue. Chapter 299, Ruler Armament. The other woman stared coldly at Jian Chen. Then, in a split second, her pupils suddenly dilated as her face underwent a change. With shock, she looked at Jian Chen's face closely before giving off an enraged aura. So it's you. You're that smelly rogue. This yellow-clothed girl was the very same girl Jian Chen had accidentally stumbled upon when Jian Chen was bathing in the same river outside Wake City. Seeing how Jian Chen had recognized her, the girl immediately felt the memories coming back to her. Feeling intense shame, the woman felt an indescribable amount of hatred burst in her heart. With an angry shout, she charged at Jian Chen. Up until that year, the girl had never been peeped on when bathing by a man before. So that had been a bitter event where every moment of her life, she had always thought about finding the man who dared look at her body and punish him. However, after departing from Wake City, she had never found Jian Chen's footsteps, which caused her feelings of hatred to slowly leak away. Today, however, when she found him again, her heart had instantly burst with anger beyond reason. Jian Chen looked at her with a serious face. The girl's first strike had caused him to feel awe, but he had not been discouraged. Instead, his fighting spirit had been roused to the maximum. As the two exchanged blows, the girl suddenly realized something new. Right now, Jian Chen's strength was vastly different than what it was like before. An Earth Saint Master, you've made a breakthrough to that realm? Just how? In the past, your strength was far inferior to mine and you still couldn't be a match for me. It has only been a few years, just how did you make such a large leap in strength for you to be able to be my opponent? The girl cried out in shock. She looked at the handsome face of Jian Chen, unable to take the news realistically. Despite the shock, she continued to fight Jian Chen with her blue-colored sword that continued to fire off water saint force as she fought. Miss, that accident back then was a misunderstanding. Even if we continue fighting, the outcome is not clear. Why don't we stop fighting? Despite it happening a long time ago, Jian Chen still felt that he was in the wrong. The person was a woman after all, and he had accidentally saw her most private spots. This to him, made him very apologetic. You bastard, don't you even think about it. This miss will definitely teach you a lesson. Hearing Jian Chen mention that forbidden event, the girl howled in anger. Leaping back, she withdrew the golden longbow on her back and immediately aimed the bow at him. Straight after the longbow had been pulled back, a single arrow made of pure energy began to form. The entire shaft began to emit a large rippling force of energy as soon as it fully condensed. Jian Chen became startled at the sight. His mind instantly made the connection that it was this longbow that had been responsible for the first strike. Without a single bit of hesitation, he immediately leaped behind the peak he had been on. At that moment, the lady had already released the string and sent the energy arrow flying. The arrow immediately flew at high speed toward the peak Jian Chen was hiding behind. Bang! Following an ear-deafening sound, the 300-meter tall peak immediately toppled down in a cascade of rocks. Jian Chen's ash-covered body flew out of the rubble with amazement. The longbow in the girl's possession was far too strong. He didn't know what type of weapon it was, but it was able to release the same amount of power from an Earth Saint Master as an advanced tier magical crystal cannon could. Just as Jian Chen landed on the ground, the girl came at him with an arrow already flying straight at him once more. Startled, Jian Chen immediately threw himself to the side as another golden arrow flew through where Jian Chen was once standing at. Bang! Another mountain peak crumbled from the strike due to the overpowering might of the golden longbow. Every arrow was capable of destroying a mountain peak and could even bring an Earth Saint Master to a standstill. The longbow might have been able to strike against a Heaven Saint Master. Jian Chen's figure continued to flicker away from sight as he dodged the girl's arrows. Although the arrows were traveling at an extremely fast speed, Jian Chen himself wasn't all that slow. He was always able to dodge at the last moment so that the closest arrow hadn't even nicked him, thus escaping danger. After a while, Jian Chen began to lose strength. He didn't dare take on another arrow now since each arrow was capable of causing a tremendous amount of damage. Bastard, if you're a man, don't even think about running away. Releasing another barrage of 20 arrows, the girl cried out in anger. I don't wish to stand around to be your live shooting target, I'm just not that foolish. Jian Chen spoke. You, the woman immediately felt her cheeks redden in anger. Even with the anger she felt toward Jian Chen, she couldn't help but feel conflicted. In the past, she had desperately wished to turn the one who looked at her naked body into mincemeat, but now, she realized that the scoundrel that had seen and touched her had inexplicably grew to the same level as her. Despite that huge jump however, she still couldn't accept him as someone respectable. Ha ha ha, Wan Air, it's a good thing that you made such a ruckus here or else I never would have been able to find you. You've made me suffer quite a bit. Suddenly, 5 men came out of nowhere and landed nearby. Upon hearing them, the girl's face suddenly grew dark. Immediately halting her attack on Jian Chen, she leaped back and began to shoot her longbow at the 5 newcomers with no hesitation. Whoosh! The golden arrows flew through the air with a whistling sound as they traveled toward the men. The men dropped down from the peak they were standing on as the golden arrow flew toward them. Just as an arrow was about to make contact, a transparent barrier appeared and covered them all. The powerful golden arrow made contact with the barrier, trembling for a moment, but it successfully blocked the arrow, protecting the men inside. Luan Air, don't waste your energy. Your ruler armament can't hurt me. One of the youths from the group laughed. His age wasn't all that old and looked to be around Ming Dong's age, near 27 or 28. Ruler's armament? Could that longbow be a ruler's armament? Jian Chen was filled with confusion. A ruler armament was something he was unfamiliar with since this was the first time he had heard of it. Miss Luan Air, you should hand over your ruler armament. There is no one around to protect you and I see no way for you to escape our grasp. The youth laughed with a casual smile. The girl's face seemed to have frozen over as she looked at the 5 with a furious look. Wanting my ruler armament is wishful thinking. Wait until we make it out, Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun will definitely avenge this. Ha, Huan Air, don't even think about the 2 old men. They will be dealt with as well. The 5 men were quickly approaching with the youth still laughing. Hearing this, the yellow-robed girl glared as she shot another 3 arrows. So your Shi family has been conspiring for our Huang family's ruler armament. The ruler armament is something our Shi family wants. Hand it over obediently and don't waste your energy. With that, there was less than a kilometer dividing the 2. During their approach, the girl continued to fire off shots one after another at the men. Their barrier continued to shake and tremble under the barrage, but the energy shock waves from the blasts continued to hit the surrounding ground and shock the eardrums of everyone there. Jian Chen looked on at the longbow in mute silence. The girl was shooting arrows at an incredibly strong rate with an equally strong amount of force, but they were unfortunately too weak to break the barrier. There was not a single amount of damage on any of the 5, but now they couldn't move forward either with the increasing amount of arrows coming at them. Uwan heir, don't bother yourself. Using the ruler armament uses a large amount of saint force. You can't keep this up for long. The moment your saint force is gone, then your fate is in our hands. The youth holding up the barrier laughed evilly as he stared at the girl with obscene eyes. The lady continued to shoot arrow after arrow at them. With each shot, the sounds reverberated throughout the mountain range. The shots were extremely loud and had attracted many men. Every man proceeded to cautiously hide in faraway places, watching from afar within the barrier. The 4 men behind the barrier inched toward the sides. In an instant, they charged from the barrier toward the girl from every direction. Immediately reassigning her target, the girl shot a single arrow that flew at one of the men with a golden light. Following an explosive bang, the man flew away with blood coming out from his mouth. Following the violent twang of the bowstring, another arrow was shot forth and pierced through the chest of another. A hole the size of a small fist could be seen after the arrow flew through and had completely obliterated the organs within his body. Even as the girl killed 2 of the 4 in a short amount of time, the other 2 men had already traveled to the side where the girl was. In an instant, their saint weapons appeared in their hands as they slashed down at her. The longbow was useless in close range, so the girl put away her longbow on her back and pulled out her blue sword once more to fight with the 2 men. Uwan heir, who's going to save you now? At that moment, the youth that had been maintaining the barrier immediately charged forth with a bright red spear ready to strike. While the youth wasn't that old, he along with the other 2 men were all Earth Saint Masters. With the fight being 1 versus 3, she had quickly lost any advantages she had. Adding on to the other side's battle experience, she couldn't do anything but be slowly forced back. Chapter 300, Seal of Treasure Mountain. Uwan heir, you can't hold on for much longer now. Hand over the ruler armament obediently and don't resist. The youth laughed again with a carefree smile as if the ruler armament was already his. Sure Xian Gran, you are dreaming if you think you'll be able to get my ruler armament. The girl shouted angrily as she turned toward Jian Chen. Scoundrel! If you help me deal with them, then I'll write off our differences. Hearing the girl request for help, the youth's face grew dark as he looked at Jian Chen dangerously. This is a personal grudge between the Shi family and the Huang family. If you try to intervene, then be prepared to face the consequences. This is the grudge between our 2 families. If an outsider dares to intervene, then they won't be able to live another 3 months. The other male fighting the girl cried out in anger as he moved about in his black clothes. Anyone not related to this matter should leave immediately or else face the wrath of our Shi family. Any one of our hated enemies will be eternally hunted down. The second man with a scar on his face roared as he tried to intimidate Jian Chen. Although they had the superiority in numbers, they desperately wanted the ruler armament. At such a crucial moment, they didn't want another mishap to happen. In the case that they could take hold of the ruler armament, then they would have nothing to fear. Within the gathering of the mercenaries, no man would be able to threaten them if they were to use the ruler armament. Jian Chen stood right where he was in complete disregard of the men's threats. Looking at the girl being pushed back, Jian Chen began to hesitate for a moment on whether or not he should help her avoid this calamity. Although the past event had caused Jian Chen to feel some guilt, he hadn't forgotten about the heavy price he had paid in the past. The 2 elders had caused a tremendous amount of damage to him, so severe that he had almost no chance of survival. Adding on to that, the girl had also tried to attack him from afar with arrows of unbelievable strength. Then she had shot more than 20 arrows at him, causing him to feel a good amount of anger. A miserable cry could be heard as the girl wasn't able to dodge in time and took a slash to her arm. Right now the 3 men were advancing in on her from 3 different directions, making it nearly impossible for her to escape. At this sight, Jian Chen knew that the girl wouldn't be able to last any longer. Throwing away his hesitation and biting his lips, he made his decision. With his light wind sword, he flew into the encirclement and blocked the sword of the black-robed man. So you dare to get in the way of our Shi family, you must be tired of living. The man roared. Kid, it's too late to run now. The long spear-wielding youth thundered at Jian Chen while lashing out at the girl with a malicious face and an angry roar. Refusing to listen, Jian Chen began to launch a fierce amount of sword chi from his sword to the black-robed man. Using his axe, the black-robed man waved it in order to block the incoming attack. In the end, his axe wasn't fast enough for Jian Chen. In 2 moves, he was completely overwhelmed by Jian Chen. Just as he tried to swing his axe, Jian Chen's sword thrust forward with such a speed that the man wasn't able to recall his axe in time. The sword immediately pierced through his throat with the tip of the sword, causing droplets of blood to come dripping out. The black-robed man looked at Jian Chen with a rigid look of disbelief. He couldn't believe that Jian Chen had been so fast for him to be unable to even react to his strike. Third eldest. Seeing the black-robed man die, the other man fighting the girl immediately flew into a teeth-gnashing rage with eyes that overflowed with killing intent for Jian Chen. Even the nearly 30-year-old youth had been caught off guard by this. He didn't think that such a young youth like Jian Chen would be able to kill an Earth Saint Master so quickly. Such a strong fighting strength like this had even caused him to feel some fear. My friend, there is no need for you to incur the anger of our Shi family. Could it be that you've forgotten about how this girl has treated you? If you join hands with us, then if we can deal with this girl, our Shi family will reward you heavily. The youth spoke out to Jian Chen. Spare him your lies, the men from the Shi family have always been despicably shameless. Your words are nothing but empty. Once you've killed a member of the Shi family, then they will never let you go. The girl was afraid that Jian Chen would help them and began to talk quickly. Jian Chen continued to have that cold impassive look on his face as he pulled the sword out from the black-robed man's throat. He had ignored the words from both sides since he had long since made his conclusion. Immediately running toward the other man fighting the girl, his sword flashed like lightning in an attempt to strike at him. You're seeking death. At this, the youth cried out in anger as his face clouded over. He hadn't thought that the youth would refuse his sweet-sounding invitation. This was a heavy shock to him and caused him to feel extremely angry as well before feeling a strong amount of killing intent overtake him. Jian Chen's light wind sword flew at the man with multiple mirror images that covered the sky with the sheer amount of them. It was hard to tell the difference between real and fake, and even if the man could tell, it would disappear in the next second as the sword came ever so close to him. The man grew serious at this sight. Immediately closing his eyes, he allowed his spirit to feel out the sword's true trajectory as the giant sword in his own hand began to pulsate with saint force. Jian Chen's light wind sword continued to strike forward one movement at a time. Each thrust was inconceivably fast and seemed as if it was just one huge blur. Anyone on the outside would only see Jian Chen was striking once, but in reality he had already struck out several times in a single movement that made it seem like one. With such a fast speed like this, the man would be unable to block all of them and could only defend himself a few times before the sword strikes increase anymore. This opponent is too strong, Lord Shi, please activate the barrier. The man cried as he retreated away from Jian Chen. His voice had already begun to tremble in fear as he felt his neck start to bleed from being nicked several times. Hearing the frightened yelp of the man, the youth looked on in alarm. Hastily, he looked at Jian Chen and the man's fight only to see that the man was slowly being forced back away from Jian Chen while defending himself blindly. At the same time, the girl he had been fighting turned to look at Jian Chen with her bright eyes. With a look of disbelief, she too felt shocked from such a scene. How can this be? His strength has suddenly become something completely amazing. He wasn't like this before, and even then he was already injured by several of my arrows before. The girl was in shock. Then, a light went off in her head as she thought, could it be that he was holding back his strength when he was fighting me? Kid, you've ruined a major affair with our Shi family. We will definitely not forgive you for this. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, our Shi family experts will dismember your body limb by limb. The youth roared with anger. Each word had been angrily gnashed out for emphasis. Even as he spoke, a transparent barrier suddenly came into view and protected his entire body. The youth retreated from his battle with the girl and came to protect the middle-aged man from Jian Chen's attack. His long spear was like a viper that blurred as it flew at Jian Chen's heart. Jian Chen's light-wind sword suddenly began to spike with an incredibly sharp amount of sword qi. As it met the long spear, the sword slid across the spear's shaft to stab fiercely into the barrier. The barrier shook for a moment before regaining a tranquil state almost instantly. While the barrier looked weak, the defenses were actually absurdly strong, so even Jian Chen's sword was unable to shatter it. The youth behind the barrier looked at the sword with some fear before glaring at Jian Chen with a sneer, "Kid, you're not long for life now." With that, he hefted his spear upward before smashing down at him with a whistling sound. Without a single word, Jian Chen dodged the spear before turning toward the middle-aged man. With a silver light, his light-wind sword flew at his throat. The middle-aged man was still feeling some fear from Jian Chen's sword, so he could only try to defend himself from Jian Chen. When he saw Jian Chen's sword come at him, he lifted his sword up in a protective manner while throwing himself back to allow the barrier to protect him. Although being beaten by a 20-year-old youth was extremely embarrassing for him, compared to his life, what use was face or money? Just as the light-wind sword made contact with the man's sword, the very tip immediately broke through the sword and stabbed into the man's heart. A large amount of the sword qi within the sword burst outward and completely destroyed his heart and the other inner organs. The man's body immediately locked up rigidly as blood poured out from his wounds. Even in death, his eyes stared at Jian Chen in utter shock before slowly falling to the ground, dead to the world. "Why you?" The youth hidden behind the barrier went ashen in the face while trying to say something. Both of his eyes spat out metaphorical fires as he stared at Jian Chen with pure hatred that was unmatched by any other feelings he had ever felt before. Before, he was in great shape without any major problems. He had thought that his plan was already perfected and the ruler armament was already in his hands. However, at this crucial moment, Jian Chen had appeared and turned back the situation. His completed mission had instantly gone up in smoke and he had even lost 2 of the Earth Saint Master experts with him. "Shi Xiangran, I don't see any way for you to take my ruler armament now." The girl spoke with relief in her heart as she stared vehemently at the youth. A few days ago, the fellow bodyguards from the Huang family had valiantly given up their lives in order to protect her from the Shi family men. Just thinking about those deaths had caused the girl to feel an extreme amount of grief and anguish. Slowly retrieving the longbow on her back, she drew the longbow and pointed it at Shi Xiangran despite knowing her strength wasn't strong enough to break the barrier. Shi Xiangran's face grew extremely dark. Good. I wasn't planning on using my secret treasure, but you've really forced my hand." With that, Shi Xiangran suddenly took out an iron chunk within the space ring on his finger. The chunk was dark green in color and had a simple decorative design on it. The moment the girl saw the chunk in his hands, her face instantly grew shocked. "That's the seal of Treasure Mountain. I didn't think that the Shi family would have allowed you to carry such a priceless defensive treasure." Chapter 301, The Terrifying Seal of Treasure Mountain. "I didn't think you would even know about the Seal of Treasure Mountain our Shi family took possession of a few dozen years ago." Shi Xiangran laughed darkly. Immediately putting away her longbow on her back, she continued to run before turning her head towards Jian Chen as she called out to him, "Scoundrel, we have to run." Even as she cried out to him, she was already running far away with a panicked look. Jian Chen looked at the frantic girl with some confusion. He was completely puzzled. Could the iron chunk in Shi Xiangran's hand contain some sort of terrifying power? Despite the confusion, Jian Chen knew that he was completely unaware of whatever secret it might contain. Without any hesitation, he turned and began to run from Shi Xiangran. With the seal of Treasure Mountain, you shouldn't even think about escaping." Shi Xiangran's face grew dark as he threw the iron chunk into the air. As soon as it flew into the air, the iron chunk began to transform into a 100-meter-long circumference iron seal as it flew toward Jian Chen's head at an inconceivable speed. Jian Chen's eyes widened as he stared in complete shock at the base of the pitch-black iron seal. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Jian Chen could swear that he had never once seen or heard about something like this before. Just what is this eccentric item? Jian Chen thought with shock and curiosity. However, the floating iron seal didn't give Jian Chen any time to think, and immediately came down on Jian Chen with a huge amount of pressure. It was with a startling realization that Jian Chen had finally figured out the secret behind the iron seal. This was used for smashing people. If anyone were to be smashed by this, then they would take a tremendous amount of damage. Jian Chen quickly ran outside. The 100-meter-long circumference iron seal descended so quickly that before Jian Chen had even run 20 meters outwards, the iron seal was already falling down towards his head. With an explosive shout, Jian Chen brought his saint weapon up against the base of the iron seal in hopes of slowing its descent. Just then, the density of the iron seal far outweighed the force Jian Chen exerted. With a bang, the seal slammed Jian Chen's body down through the earth, leaving behind an unbelievably deep crater. In front, the shocked girls saw that Jian Chen had been pressed into the ground. Flustered, she stopped running and immediately cursed out loud, "You scoundrel, how could you be this stupid? I told you to run, but you stood there like an idiot. An idiot's death. That's what you deserve. Humph, you dared to go against our Shi family, so this is where you depart from life and die like the beggar you are." Shi Xiangran spat as he stared at the crater left behind by Jian Chen. The strength of the seal of Treasure Mountain was clear to see. Ever since the Shi family had gained control of it, it sat within their secured treasure room, its legend passed down from generation to generation. Up until now, its strength had been unimaginable and never had there been an Earth Saint Master that was able to survive a single impact. Shi Xiangran lifted his hand, causing the floor ahead of him to start trembling. Immediately, the giant seal began to lift up from the ground. It shrank back down to a chunk the size of his fist, and landed in his hand. After securing his treasure, Shi Xiangran turned back to the dead, middle-aged men behind him and took their space belts. Then, with the barrier still activated, he turned to chase after the girl. Just as the seal left the crater to return to Shi Xiangran, a muddy figure suddenly flew out of the hole like a lightning bolt, and stabbed at Shi Xiangran with his sword Qi-enhanced sword. Shi Xiangran was extremely shocked, but with his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he could react in time to respond. Holding out his long spear in front of him, the barrier reactivated once more. With the barrier activated, the silver sword continued to be pushed back farther and farther away from his body. "You! How did you not die?" Shi Xiangran cried out as he looked at the muddy figure. This type of result wasn't something he had expected to see. Seeing how his attack was repelled by the barrier, the muddy Jian Chen could only sigh in disappointment. Quickly kneeling down to the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Shi Xiangran sneered at the sight, "You are the first Earth Saint Master to not die from the seal of Treasure Mountain, be proud of that achievement. It would seem that the seal has done a good amount of damage to you. Then allow me to use the seal once more to end your life. An Earth Saint Master can't take a second hit from this, you should have no regrets with your death this time." With this, Jian Chen narrowed his eyes. Having learned his lesson, he quickly began to retreat backwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain immediately enlarged before flying towards Jian Chen. The overwhelming pressure from the seal almost suffocated Jian Chen. After taking a single hit from the seal, Jian Chen finally understood just how strong this strange seal was. If he were to be smashed by this seal once more, then it would all be over. Even if he didn't die, he would be forced to his dying breath anyway. Damn it all, what kind of an object is this for it to be so strong? And just why haven't I heard of such a thing before? Jian Chen cursed as he looked at the giant seal flying towards him. Even when he was in Kargath Library, he had never seen any information about such a thing. The seal of Treasure Mountain flew at tremendous speeds, and with Jian Chen's injuries, he could not run as fast as before. This meant he would not be able to outrun the seal. Even now as he glanced back, the seal was already quickly approaching him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, a concentrated amount of fire could be heard as a series of golden arrows flew through the air and smashed against the seal. Bang! Following the loud bang, the iron seal began to shake for a moment before flying at Jian Chen at a slightly reduced speed. Seeing how the iron seal was about to end Jian Chen's life, the yellow-robed girl immediately stopped running and withdrew her longbow to shoot at the seal with frightening speed. Each arrow allowed Jian Chen another moment to run away to escape from Shi Xiangran. "You repulsive wench. Wait until I grab a hold of you, I'll definitely torture you to death." Shi Xiangran glared at the girl with a malicious look as he roared and gnashed his teeth in anger. "Scoundrel, hurry up and get to where I am." The girl ignored Shi Xiangran and cried out for Jian Chen to follow her. After hearing the girl, Jian Chen didn't hesitate any longer and immediately threw himself in her direction as the iron seal followed close behind. She continued to pull back her bowstring, and arrow after arrow continued to fly at the seal, causing multiple explosions to rock the air. With the girl's assistance, Jian Chen finally pulled far away from the seal and arrived where the girl was. "Hurry up. The seal of Treasure Mountain is incomparably strong. If it smashes into a Heaven Saint Master, even they will take on heavy damages. It's a good thing that Shi Xiangran's strength isn't that high, otherwise he'd be able to use the seal of Treasure Mountain to its fullest potential." The woman cried as she continued to fire arrows at the seal while retreating backwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain's advance was slowed as each arrow shot by the girl exploded upon impact. At the same time, she and Jian Chen continued to run away from it. After a certain distance, the girl aimed her bow at Shi Xiangran. Although her arrow wouldn't be able to hurt him, the explosive arrows would still prevent him from moving forwards. The seal of Treasure Mountain can't get 50 meters out of his reach, otherwise it'll be uncontrollable. The girl explained to Jian Chen as if she was very familiar with the treasure. As the two ran farther and farther away, Shi Xiangran could only watch from afar while being pelted with arrows. They eventually disappeared from sight. 4 hours later, Jian Chen and the girl finally came to a stop 10 kilometers away, and found a mountain cave to take refuge in. The cave wasn't too large, and there were even traces of someone having enlarged the hole. Sounds of crackling could occasionally be heard from the small campfire lighting up the cave. Jian Chen lay powerless on the ground with a pale face. First, he had been hurt by the girl's arrows and then fought in a battle with her. Then, before his body had even healed from his wounds, he had been smashed deep into the ground by the giant iron seal. This had caused more damage to his body than he was used to, and had even threatened his life. Right now his entire body was crushed and damaged to a large extent. If a regular Earth Saint Master were to be hit by the seal of Treasure Mountain, then they would have died for sure. The sounds of clothes being torn could be heard as the girl tended to the wound on her arm behind a large rock. The longbow continued to stay on her back for safety. Cough. Jian Chen coughed twice as 2 mouthfuls of blood flew out from his mouth. With his current injuries, it was imperative that he heal as quickly as possible. However, with the girl nearby, he wasn't able to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal himself. If he were to use it, then his secret would definitely be revealed. Jian Chen didn't want his secret regarding the Radiant Saint Force to be revealed, since everyone knew that Radiant Saint Masters were completely inept in martial arts. They could be said to be extremely weak. Since he was an Earth Saint Master and his aptitude with the Radiant Saint Force wasn't bad at all, then there would definitely be a lot of trouble for him if it were to be revealed. If he were to silently endure the pain and try to circulate his inner Saint Force, then his healing factor would be somewhat accelerated. At that moment, the girl came out from behind the stone with her wounds all dressed. Looking at the muddy Jian Chen, her eyes revealed a rare emotion of worry before quickly being hidden once more. Holding out a single white jade bottle toward Jian Chen, she said, "This is my family's secret healing panacea. Go and use it." Chapter 302, Legend of the Ruler Armament. Taking the jade white bottle into his own hands silently, Jian Chen poured the contents into his mouth. Right now he couldn't use the Radiant Saint Force to heal, so he desperately needed to use medicine to heal. Plus, with his 1,000 immunity, he wasn't afraid of the girl handing him any type of poison. The contents of the bottle weren't in pill form and was actually in a liquid form which tasted rather bitter. Jian Chen poured the liquid within his mouth in one go and swallowed. The moment it entered his body, a warm sensation traveled through his body slowly before covering every single part of it. Feeling a great change happen within his body, Jian Chen closed his eyes to allow the healing process to begin. However, he still maintained a strong vigilance to the outside world. Although he and the girl were now on equal terms, but who could guarantee that nothing would happen? Who knew if this girl from a grand and rich family would suddenly strike at him with her sword? Looking at Jian Chen close his eyes while he healed with a complicated look, the girl walked over to the campfire silently. Sitting down, she held her knees together with both hands and stared at the dancing fire with her bright and intelligent eyes, her thoughts unknown to the world. The cave descended into an unnatural quiet, only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard. With the tree branches feeding the fire, it would occasionally let out a snapping sound. As Jian Chen continued to heal, the girl never struck out at him once. Instead, she sat by the fire and continued to watch the flames dance absent-mindedly. 4 hours later, Jian Chen opened his eyes and crawled up in a sitting position with some effort as his arms leaned against the cold cliff walls. After these 4 hours of treatment, he had completely absorbed the healing properties of the medicine. Although he was still far away from being completely healed, he was at the very least stabilized for now. Noticing the yellow-clothed girl sitting by the fire, his eyes latched onto the golden bow on her back. "Could you tell me, just what type of weapon that bow is on your back? How is it possible for it contains so much strength? And the man that was chasing you with the seal of Treasure Mountain, just what type of weapon was that? It's plain to see that it's not your saint weapon, but the power was completely terrifying." Jian Chen asked with curiosity as his heart raced to hear the answer. Hearing that Jian Chen was awake, the girl tilted her head up to look at Jian Chen before immediately turning back to the dancing flames without a word. Jian Chen didn't ask again. He knew that this matter was extremely secretive, and if the girl wasn't willing to tell him, then he wouldn't beg. "Those weapons are ruler armaments." After some time, the girl finally spoke. "The conditions of making a ruler armament are very unkind. There aren't many of them within the Tian Yuan continent, and it is said that ruler armaments are the weapons of saint rulers. After a saint ruler dies, instead of their saint weapon decomposing away into the world, they retain their form perfectly." The girl slowly began to explain as she held her longbow. Then silently, she said, "This longbow's name is the Solunar Bow. This is our Huang family's ruler armament that has been passed down from generation to generation and has become our ancient family heirloom for the next generation. If this ruler armament was formed by a saint weapon, then it is no wonder it's this strong." Jian Chen thought to himself. The seal of Treasure Mountain within Shi Xiangran's hand is also a ruler armament. Although it isn't as strong as my Solunar Bow, combined with his superior strength, he is already a second cycle Earth Saint Master. With the seal of Treasure Mountain, he is much stronger than me even with my Solunar Bow. The girl explained. "What is that barrier he has on him?" Jian Chen continued to ask. "If it weren't for that barrier, then he would have killed Shi Xiangran already. That barrier was something a saint ruler put on him. Its defensive ability is remarkably strong, so even my Solunar Bow is unable to break it." The girl narrowed her eyes. Regarding the barrier of Shi Xiangran, she felt like having a headache each time she heard about it. "Is there any way for us to break it or for it to fade away?" Jian Chen asked. The girl said, "If there is, then I'm unable to do it. If the barrier is attacked with an attack far beyond what it can handle, then it'll naturally shatter. Other than that, the barrier will fade away with time, but how long it'll take for that to happen, I don't know." Gnashing her teeth, she spoke angrily, "If it weren't for the barrier protecting Shi Xiangran, I would have shot him dead a long time ago. How vile the Shi family is. For them to use the gathering of the mercenaries to steal our Huang family's ruler armament. It's unfortunate that my fellow family had fallen prey to the evil schemes of the Shi family for the sake of allowing me to run away. Just wait until we're out, then I'll have Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun avenge the death of my family members. The girl spoke with an angry promise. Hearing that, Jian Chen laughed. I'm sure that I heard Shi Xiangran say that he will have men deal with your two uncles, leaving you unprotected. Clenching her fists tightly, she spat out, abominable Shi family. They continue to try to take our Salunar Bao, they must have planned everything out. Jian Chen couldn't help but to take in some delight from this. Shi Xiangran has that barrier protecting him, making him intangible. Along with his ruler armament, he has truly come prepared. It would appear that your Huang family's Salunar Bao is destined to fall into their hands. The girl snapped as she flew up with her arms raised as she stared vehemently at Jian Chen. You should learn to be quiet, you scoundrel, or else see what happens when I'm through with you. Ha, all I'm saying is the truth. Jian Chen had no fear, as if he felt secure in his knowledge. You. The girl continued to stare angrily at Jian Chen for a while before finally sighing and walking to the entrance of the cave. Her departure was what Jian Chen had wanted. Using his hearing to listen to see how far away the girl was, Jian Chen began to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal himself. The Radiant Saint Force began to gather slowly and illuminated the dark cave in an instant. The Radiant Saint Force began to condense into a milky white light that made the inside of the cave seem as if it was daytime. Within this previously dark cave, the Radiant Saint Force would have caused anyone that noticed it to instantly become awake. The bright light was as fierce as the sun itself, but while it continued to shine brightly, the sight was not intense on the eyes. Controlling the Radiant Saint Force required the usage of spirit. With Jian Chen's spirit increasing in amount and quality after he made the breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master, his spirit had become more refined. It could be used to improve his usage of the Radiant Saint Force to an even higher height, and so not only was the Radiant Saint Force even richer in quality, but the time to make it was less now. Another 2 hours later, the Radiant Saint Force had completely healed Jian Chen at a rate that could only be described as miraculous. Now that Jian Chen's health was back to normal, he immediately leaped up from the ground and took out a water canteen from his space ring. Shedding off his clothes, he began to clean himself. This source of water was something Jian Chen had planned since the beginning. Since his space ring was spacious enough, he had been able to collect plenty of water gourds that weighed at 25 kilograms each. This was enough for him to last a while even in the most dire of circumstances. Hua hua. The ice-cold water splashed against Jian Chen's head as the remaining filth flowed away from his body. When the water hit the ground, it made a splashing sound as it scattered in every direction with a sharp and loud sound. At this moment, the yellowed-clothed girl was sitting on a rock right outside the cave entrance with a look of worry. She was concerned about the words Jian Chen had said to her. The Shi family were definitely prepared this time, and while Uncle Feng and Yun were both quite strong, the Shi family had plenty of experts that could fight against those two. If the words of Shi Xiangran could be trusted, then their family had already employed some people to deal with the two. If this was the case, then she would have no one to rely on. In this place, Shi Xiangran still had that defensive barrier, so her Salunar Bao wasn't able to do anything against him despite its power. At this moment, the Seal of Treasure Mountain was a ruler armament as well. In the case that Shi Xiangran were to use it against her Salunar Bao, then she would have no opportunity to strike at him. Although it could be said that she could use her Salunar Bao against his barrier, at the very most it would be a stalemate for a small amount of time. She couldn't use the Bao forever since it would drain her Saint Force at an incredible rate. I'll definitely protect the Salunar Bao. If worst comes to worst, I'll have to rely on Mercenary City and wait for the clan to help. I doubt the Shi family would dare to fight against Mercenary City for it. The girl spoke in an icy tone. At this moment, a strange sound could be heard inside the cave. Immediately, the girl turned toward the sound confused as she stared within the dark abyss of the cave. How strange, how could there be any sound? The scoundrel is heavily injured, so he shouldn't be able to move at all. With an uneasy heart, she began to quietly move toward the insides of the cave. At this moment, Jian Chen had just finished bathing himself. Although the girl was walking deeper into the cave, she wasn't leaking any killing intent, imposing aura or any dangerous thoughts. Because of the heavy sounds of the water hitting the ground, Jian Chen had been unable to detect the sounds of her walking in. Quickly, the girl continued to walk in with a curious expression. Walking in with a cautious attitude, the moment she clearly saw the scene inside, her face immediately froze. In that instant, she could see that Jian Chen had just finished showering and was completely naked. "Ah! You rotten scoundrel!" The girl was quick to react and shrieked with a loud sound. Guadong! The gourd that Jian Chen had above his head immediately fell to the floor with a crashing sound as it broke. Quickly, Jian Chen grabbed a set of clothes from within his space ring and flew to a dark corner of the cave. Not even caring for the wet droplet on his body, he hurriedly began to dress himself. By that point, the girl had already covered both her eyes with her hands as she looked elsewhere. Her beautiful face had instantly turned bright as her heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Chapter 303, Uniting. After walking out, the girl never returned to the inside of the cave. Even Jian Chen, who had changed into a new pair of clothes, had turned red in the face. He had felt embarrassed to a major degree and even a little angry. He didn't think that the girl wouldn't have any manners and would walk in without making her presence known. If it weren't for her quick reaction, Jian Chen would have assumed that she didn't have a grudge at all for him seeing her naked body, and today would be the day that she would return the favor. If Jian Chen's thoughts were to be discovered by this girl, then drowning himself in a river wouldn't be enough for the girl. After putting on some clothes, Jian Chen walked out of the cave where the girl stood not too far away with her back facing him. Even though he couldn't see her face, Jian Chen could see the two sides of her neck were bright red, meaning her cheeks must have been as well. After being discovered completely naked by a girl as he showered, it was completely hard for Jian Chen to not feel embarrassed. He still managed to hold a serious look on his face as he spoke out, "Hey, how could you be so rude and walk in without a sound to look at me while I shower?" A few years back, after accidentally seeing the girl's body, he had suffered greatly from it. Now that the girl had silently and sneakily walked into the cave as he bathed, this was an opportunity that Jian Chen would not dare to miss. The girl had initially been embarrassed, but the moment she heard Jian Chen say that she snuck in to look at him shower, her red face immediately grew murderous. No longer feeling ashamed, she turned around to look at him. "Pa, who says I was trying to look at you shower? Do you even have any eyes?" Jian Chen was speechless. To avoid having water in his eyes, he had shut them, so he didn't see the girl's figure. However, he had heard her shriek. With an honest expression, he spoke evenly, "My two eyes can see perfectly fine." "Pa, what a scoundrel you are, do you even feel any shame? Let me ask you this, that cave was originally mine, I was kind in allowing you to stay there for now, but then you began to take a shower without even telling me. This was your fault in the first place, so don't go blaming me." The girl fired back in order to retain her pride. Before Jian Chen could say anything to use against her, she would have to try to win the argument first. "This cave had been made by someone else, just when did it become yours?" Jian Chen asked, bewildered. "This is a cave with no owner, but since I was the first to enter, then naturally I would be the owner of the cave," the girl said confidently. Arguing was a specialty that she was good at. Jian Chen wasn't convinced by her words and was left speechless. He knew that if he argued with her, he would lose for sure. There weren't too many people that he'd met that he couldn't kill, and equally less people that were stronger than him. However, a fight of words was a different story. The points Jian Chen made were eaten up by her. Logic was not something that agreed with her. Her logic was both preposterous and stubborn. The girl could say that 1 was 2 and that 2 was 3, and would be very confident in herself. Logic was not something that agreed with her, and the words that Jian Chen had tried to use to win had been eaten up by her. You win." Jian Chen spoke with a huff. He hadn't planned on letting her win, but who could have imagined that not even 2 sentences later, she had fully suppressed him with her words and given him no chance to win. I've seen your body and you've seen mine. But I've also saved your life, so let's consider this even. If I owe you in the future, tell me. With that, Jian Chen began to walk away without a look back. Yo you rogue. Upon hearing Jian Chen say that he had seen her body, the girl immediately grew flustered as her mind couldn't help but think back to that one time. Her beautiful face instantly lit up with a reddish hue. Immediately, her good mood after beating Jian Chen shriveled away as she grew both embarrassed and angry. Who told you to save me anyways? I didn't ask you. If it weren't for me impeding the seal of Treasure Mountain, then you would have long since been smashed to pieces by it. The girl said angrily as she tried to find a way to fire back at him. Hearing that, Jian Chen immediately stopped moving. The situation was like she said, if it weren't for her using her Solunar Bow to control the seal, then he wouldn't have been able to escape from the seal. He didn't want to say that to her, so he continued to walk away. At this moment, the girl had finally realized that Jian Chen's wounds were completely healed and he was back to normal. Stunned, the girl couldn't understand just how Jian Chen had been able to recover thoroughly from his injuries in such a short period of time. Hey, scoundrel, how did you heal from your injuries so fast? The girl asked from behind with a hint of anger. Her bright eyes burned with curiosity as she stared at him. I had some good medicine on hand. Jian Chen didn't want to answer, but avoiding the question would have made the girl even more insistent on figuring out his secret. For the sake of dispelling her questions and doubts, he would have to carefully think of a reason. With this, Jian Chen had already moved farther and farther away and nearly made it out of the girl's sight. Seeing Jian Chen's back, the girl felt a bit indecisive. After biting her lower lip, she shouted out loud, "Stand still you scoundrel, where are you going?" Quickly, she had caught up with Jian Chen who didn't turn back to look at her. Instead, he spoke calmly, "Just why are you following me?" "Pa, who's following you?" The girl blinked. "You've killed 2 of the Shi family experts, so there is no way that they'll let you go. With the barrier of Shi Xiangran and his seal of Treasure Mountain, you won't be a match for him by yourself. If I'm not there with you, then you won't be able to live if Shi Xiangran catches hold of you. You're the one that's afraid," Jian Chen said. The girl's eyes narrowed. "I'm not afraid of anything, you scoundrel. Don't speak any more lies or I'll smash you into several pieces. If not for that bow, you aren't even an opponent for me, and even with that bow, you won't be able to beat me." Jian Chen almost seemed to forget about his unhappy state and spoke with the emotionless tone he had before all of this had even happened. "You," the girl grew quite angry now as her chest constricted with rage, but there was nothing she could say. Even in the injured state Jian Chen had been, he was still able to kill 2 Earth Saint Masters from the Shi family in record time before fighting against Shi Xiangran himself. His strength was definitely stronger than her own. In silence, the girl began to calm down before finally speaking out unwillingly, "Shi Xiangran's strength you've seen for yourself. With his defensive barrier, you have no way of harming him. Furthermore, he has the power to use the seal of Treasure Mountain whenever he wishes. If any one of us 2 were to come across him by ourselves, then we will surely eat up a heavy loss or even die. My Solunar Bow can impede Shi Xiangran for some time and control the seal of Treasure Mountain, and you can personally deal with anyone Shi Xiangran will bring. This is the only way we'll survive against him." The girl hadn't lost any face from her words, but the way she had cleverly spoken had emphasized just how much she wanted to join forces with him. Pausing to think, Jian Chen nodded his head in approval of her plan. After killing 2 of the Shi family experts, the Shi family would definitely not forgive him for this. Shi Xiangran's defensive barrier was far too strong for the Solunar Bow to break, and if Jian Chen's azure and violet sword Qi weren't enough to shatter the barrier, then Jian Chen would have no other option. Shi Xiangran had been completely unrestrainable, hidden behind his barrier. He could use his seal of Treasure Mountain to attack relentlessly. At that time, if the girl didn't use her Solunar Bow to hold back the seal of Treasure Mountain, then it would have been truly hard for him to run away. Even if he did run away from it, he would still have to waste the entire day running away from Shi Xianggran. Shi Xiangran's use of his treasure had rendered Jian Chen helpless, but if the treasure were to fall from Shi Xiangran's hands, then Jian Chen wouldn't see him as anyone strong. To be chased down and killed by someone that he didn't see as worthy would be an unbearable shame to him. So to unite with this girl would be a good plan. Jian Chen and the girl continued to travel in silence. Not even idle chatter was heard or even an introduction spoken, so neither person knew the other's name. In their hearts, it was as if the other person didn't exist. On the road, when many competitors saw just how young Jian Chen was and how beautiful the girl next to him was, they were extremely surprised. Previously, there had been 2 men that were barely great Saint Masters and even a few Earth Saint Masters that had clearly underestimated Jian Chen. The vast majority of them had been stabbed through the throat by Jian Chen's sword, while the small minority had been killed by the yellow-clothed girl after they spoke out in a rude manner toward her. One Earth Saint Master had even been blown up by her lunar bow and died a miserable and violent death. While she herself looked quite young, she was no stranger to killing. Despite not being at the level of Jian Chen, who was always calm, her expression remained the same during each kill and she delivered each blow firmly. This caused Jian Chen to secretly admire her. For a child of a rich family to be able to do this much was a hard task, especially if she was the highly valued young daughter. Half a month quickly went by as Jian Chen and the girl traveled without seeing Shi Xianggran. By now, they had traveled far away from the sword-like mountains and were now at a mountain range with grass everywhere. In this amount of time, Jian Chen and the girl continued to give each other the cold shoulder. They rarely spoke to each other or even chatted at all. The only thing worth mentioning was that in this half a month of time, the both of them had gained a plethora of profit. Each one of them had now a total of 1,000 tokens after killing several Earth Saint Masters. Even some of the great Saint Masters they had killed had at least 50 tokens. Only a month and a couple days were left with the time limit for the first round rapidly approaching. In this short amount of time, the tokens would all be congregated among the Earth Saint Masters. Very few great Saint Masters would be able to keep hold of their tokens. Just as Jian Chen and the girl were climbing on a huge slope, the sounds of battle could be heard to Jian Chen. Looking toward the source, he could see a man with Wind Saint force surrounding his body fighting against 2 Earth Saint Masters. Not too far away from them was a blood-soaked figure that was laying on the ground. The wind-attributed Earth Saint Master was extremely strong. Just by himself, he could fight against 2 Earth Saint Masters and slowly win. Both of them had plenty of injuries on their body, causing their clothes to be dyed red with blood. The wind-attributed Earth Saint Master however didn't have a single scratch on him. Subconsciously, Jian Chen looked over to where the battered individual lay. Straight away, he could see a sturdy-like build that seemed quite familiar to him. Following a closer inspection, Jian Chen's eyes suddenly flew wide open as a dangerous gleam appeared within. As soon as his eyes widened, a feeling of bloodlust could be felt. Chapter 304, Meeting Qin Shao, Qin Shao. Jian Chen roared angrily as his entire figure blurred away from sight. With a lightning-like speed, Jian Chen flew toward the 3 men who were currently fighting. At the same time, an enormous amount of killing intent began to exude from his body, shooting straight into the air. The girl watched as Jian Chen sped away with a flabbergasted look. She was previously standing right next to him with her golden longbow out. From the days she had traveled with Jian Chen, she had quickly learned his personality, but this was the first time she had seen such a drastic change in him. She hastened after Jian Chen. Jian Chen's roar was immediately heard by the 3 combatants. The 2 blood-soaked figures were shocked. They hadn't expected to come across anyone that was familiar with the young lord of the Tianqin clan. The 2 of them had already used up all of their strength fighting and were immensely relieved to see a new chance at life. The moment they saw Jian Chen run toward them, their happy look froze in place before disappearing from their faces and were instead replaced with looks of utter despair. The both of them knew Jian Chen and how he was the only foreign friend of Qin Shao, but while his talent at cultivation wasn't all that bad, Jian Chen was still young and only a great Saint Master. Their opponent was an Earth Saint Master and a truly strong one at that, with his Wind Saint force. If the two of them combined wouldn't be able to force him to a disadvantage, Jian Chen wouldn't be able to. By this point, the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had noticed Jian Chen. The moment he saw the handsome look on Jian Chen, his face immediately lost his look of confidence. A deep feeling of dread washed over him as he lost all of his desire to fight. I'll let you go today. The Earth Saint Master spat out unwillingly before flying into the air to run away. Just as the man left, one of the heavily injured men that lost most of his saint force immediately lost consciousness. The other man had no energy remaining either and fell to the ground on his back with a withered expression. Qin Shao, Qin Shao. How are you feeling? Wake up. Jian Chen quickly arrived at Qin Zhao's side while calling out his name repeatedly in a frantic manner. Qin Zhao's wounds were rather severe and he was covered with blood. Even the surrounding grass beneath him was soaked with his blood. On his body, Jian Chen noticed two terrifyingly deep wounds. Right on his waist, Qin Zhao's body was nearly cut in two with only around half of his body still connected. The other wound was on his chest where a sword had been run through, causing a severe amount of damage to even his inner organs. Qin Shao right now was already halfway through the gates of the underworld. Quick, use your bow to shoot him down. Don't let him escape. Jian Chen roared as he pointed at the rapidly disappearing figure of the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master to the yellow-clothed girl. Coming into view, the girl already had a hand reaching toward her bow in order to kill the man, but the moment she had heard the commanding tone of Jian Chen, her eyebrows narrowed as she dropped her hands. Returning her hands to where they originally were, she spoke with a frosty tone, I refuse to, why should I listen to you? Bang! Jian Chen's fist slammed into the ground, creating a half-a-meter hole deep into the soft ground. The bloodshot eyes of Jian Chen stared dangerously at the girl as his rage continued to fly into the air. This time, Jian Chen was truly angry. Seeing the nearly bloodthirsty and animal-like visage of Jian Chen, the girl's heart shook with some fear before stopping in place. In this moment of clarity, she suddenly felt a great deal of regret. When she refused to shoot the escaping person and lost her attention, the Wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had traveled past the mountain range and out of sight. Jian Chen. Just as Jian Chen was about to use the Radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Zhao's wounds, a faint-sounding voice could be heard as Qin Zhao's eyes opened just a crack. His mouth trembled slightly as he called out Jian Chen's name quietly. Qin Shao, hold on. I'll heal you up in a moment. Jian Chen began to control the Radiant Saint Force around the World Essence to heal Qin Shao. Right now Qin Shao was in extreme danger, his life was hanging on by a thread and could be cut at any moment. Jian Chen. Qin Zhao's eyes opened a little more as his right arm quavered in an attempt to grab onto Jian Chen's hands. Slowly placing it on his space belt, he began to speak, he. Help. Me bring, out. A gre green, bibo bottle. Out, fr from, my. Sp spa space. Belt. Qin Zhao's voice was beginning to fade in and out as his voice grew faint. With a faint exhale, his head tilted down and he fell unconscious. Jian Chen understood what Qin Zhao's message was right away. Carefully taking his space belt without touching Qin Zhao's wounds, he began to furiously search within the contents before finally taking out 3 green porcelain bottles. Just as Jian Chen took out the 3 bottles and opened them, a sweet-smelling fragrance could be detected. Each bottle contained a thumb-sized pill that exuded a faint white glow. This is... Jian Chen cried out in shock and recognition. While the 3 pellets had a faint powder look on the shell, inside the shell was a pure amount of Radiant Saint Force. Jian Chen was like a Radiant Saint Master and clearly understood the effects of the Radiant Saint Force. Immediately grabbing the pellets, he placed them into Qin Zhao's mouth. After swallowing the pill, Qin Zhao's face began to take a turn for the better in color. Despite the Radiant Saint Force-filled pill not being enough to fully heal Qin Zhao, saving his life would be no problem at all. However, Qin Zhao had yet to awaken. After Qin Zhao's condition was stabilized, Jian Chen let out a breath in relief. Then he turned to the two blood-soaked men. He had recognized the two men. One of them was Qin Zhu, the one that Qin Zhao had said his father had picked up from the outside world and raised. He was born and raised within the Tianqin clan and had an extremely loyal heart, but right now he was unconscious. The other man also wasn't a Tianqin clan member and was one of the men who had entered the space gate to Mercenary City with him. He was the comrade of Tian Zhou, but right now his face was deathly pale as he sat on the ground and ate a healing pill to recover his strength. 3 men quickly came into Jian Chen's line of sight at a quick speed. The 3 men were quickly detected by everyone, eldest brother. Suddenly, a joyous sound could be heard as the slowly healing person looked at the 3 approaching men and tried to crawl up to meet them. These 3 men were unexpectedly Tian Zhou and 2 other brothers from outside the Tianqin clan. Fourth brother. Fourth brother. Fourth brother. Tian Zhou and the other 2 were quick to recognize the blood-soaked figure and instantly called out in panic as they ran to his side. Fourth brother, how are you feeling? Who did this to you? Fourth brother, tell us, just which bastard beat you to this state? Seeing the blood-soaked figure of their brother, the other 2 men were furious. Tian Zhou's own face was rather unsightly as the 3 began to look around only to see the unconscious figure of the young lord of the Tianqin clan, Jian Chen, and the golden longbow girl right next to him. Who are you? One of the men roared at the girl. They all knew who Jian Chen was, but not who this new girl was. The girl looked at the 3 in disdain as she turned her head arrogantly to the side. It was as if she wasn't willing to talk or even look at them. Seeing the attitude of the girl, the other man barked at her coldly, "Naughty girl, we asked you a question, are you deaf?" After he spoke, the girl's expression darkened as she stared at them with a hateful glare. "Say one more word and I'll kill you." She had guessed that Jian Chen knew these men, and if it weren't for that, then she would have long since moved against these people. After all, these 3 men were Earth Saint Masters and would undoubtedly have many tokens with them. "You," the man she spoke to growled angrily as a machete-like weapon appeared within his hands, "you must be tired of living. I'll teach you a lesson then." With that, he flew at her. "Hey, second brother, don't be so reckless. You shouldn't act so soon against a beauty like her." Immediately, a rather ugly-looking man held out his hand to stop the other man from attacking as he looked at the girl with a lecherous gaze. Hearing this, the second brother was stunned for a moment before realizing what was happening. With a dark laugh, he spoke, "Third brother, you're the smart one among us. It would be a crying shame for this beautiful woman to die so soon." Then, speaking to the girl, he laughed once more, "Little beauty, I've changed my mind. Killing such a beautiful person would be a big shame. Why don't you accompany us for a good time? If you can make this a pleasurable time, then Big Brother here will let you go." The girl's face froze over in a dark expression. Hearing this, even Jian Chen's face grew dark. Although he had plenty of complaints about her, he couldn't respect the 2 for their words now, that the girl and him were both on the same side. Lastly, Tian Zhou and his brothers didn't sit right with him as Tian Zhou had initially caused plenty of trouble for him back then in the Tianqin compound. "If you don't wish to die, then it would be best for you 2 to shut your mouths." Jian Chen slowly stood up as he stared coldly at the men in front of him. "Fuck, kid. The beauty and us 2 are talking, since when was it your turn to interfere? Death won't come easy for you." The second brother glared at Jian Chen dangerously. While Jian Chen had a decent friendship with the young Lord Qin Zhao who was within the same clan as Tian Zhou, they were the brothers of Tian Zhou and knew that Jian Chen was not a person he liked. The previously silent Tian Zhou looked on with a dark expression. He had a look full of killing intent directed at Jian Chen. He had already a large amount of complaints about Jian Chen back in Walorant City and had even started a dispute. If it weren't for the patriarch coming to stop the two, then he would have fought Jian Chen. Even in Mercenary City, he had wanted to hit Jian Chen many times but was held back due to the Grand Elder. However now, there was an opportunity sitting right in front of him, he would naturally not let this go by. Tian Zhou gave a knowing look at the blood-soaked man who instantly understood what Tian Zhou was getting at. Pointing at Jian Chen, he cried out loud, "Eldest brother, second brother, third brother. We were attacked by this heartless kid. This cruel youth wanted to kill our Tianqin clan's Qin Shao. The other clan's member and I were caught off guard when he struck and were injured severely. If it weren't for eldest brother coming here so fast, then I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to meet with you right now." Sniffing away his tears, the fourth brother began to moan out loud. Tian Zhou's face froze after the outburst as he glared at Jian Chen. "Youngster, you've twisted the kindness of my elder brother while holding the esteemed title of being an honored guest. How could you be so devoid of a conscience? Today, I, Tian Zhou, will not forgive you. Third eldest, go and capture the would-be murderer of our Qin Shao." In Tian Zhou's eyes, Jian Chen was only a great saint master and didn't bother to see him as a person worth capturing personally. "Yes, eldest brother." Immediately the third brother sprung into action and flew at Jian Chen with his saint weapon. From the start, he had never bothered to place this great saint master in sight. With a gleam of light, Jian Chen didn't bother to say anything since it would all be useless. "Stop!" Suddenly, a weak-sounding voice could be heard as the blood-covered Qin Zhu awoke when the people were all distracted. With a good amount of effort, he spoke out fragilely, "You misunderstand. We were attacked by an extremely strong Earth Saint Master who was unrelated to brother Jian Chen." Tian Zhou's face turned ugly as he stared at Qin Zhu. "What rubbish! Qin Zhu, you must have hit your head. You, Qin Shao and fourth brother were clearly ambushed by Jian Chen. What other person is there?" Hearing that, Qin Zhu's eyes flashed twice but went silent. He had only just woken up and didn't hear Tian Zhou's initial words, so he wasn't clear on the situation. He did know that Tian Zhou desperately wished to make life difficult for Jian Chen. But with his severe injuries, he couldn't even look out for himself, let alone muster up the strength to help Jian Chen. At this moment, the third eldest had already reached Jian Chen and sneered right in front of his handsome, white face. With a single movement, his arm reached out to grab Jian Chen's shoulder with a strength that would shatter even the bones of a great saint master. Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously as the light wind sword appeared in his right hand. The light wind sword had already stopped right next to the man's throat before the third eldest could react. This sudden development caused the man to become shocked. Even the arm that was going to grab at Jian Chen's shoulder instantly stopped as he stood completely still. "You," the third eldest kept staring at the sword at his throat in pure speechlessness as his shock caused him to begin to stutter. A single, great saint master, had unexpectedly been able to bring his saint weapon up to his neck without him noticing. For an Earth Saint Master, this was something he was completely shocked to realize. "You've managed to turn black into white with this situation. Do not blame me for being impolite." Jian Chen glared icily at Tian Zhou as he spoke. Having been threatened by the younger generation, this made Tian Zhou's face go dark. "Forward. Kill him and save third brother." With that, Tian Zhou withdrew his red-colored sword and charged toward Jian Chen. Taking out his own saint weapon, the second brother charged toward Jian Chen as well. At the same time, the third brother that was held hostage against Jian Chen's sword immediately took advantage of the shift of focus from him to Tian Zhou and the other two. With a swift movement, his hands flew at Jian Chen's throat in an instant. With a look of disdain and a sneer, Jian Chen pulled sharply on the sword on the third brother's neck. In an instant, his head separated from his body as a fountain of blood splurted from his neck and dyed the ground below them with his blood. "Third eldest. Third eldest. Third brother." Tian Zhou and the others cried out in fury and grievance. "You bastard! I'll definitely kill you today. For vengeance." Tian Zhou and the others roared in anger as they glared at Jian Chen with eyes that could start fires as if they wanted to destroy Jian Chen. Whoosh! Suddenly, another whistling sound could be heard as a golden ray of light came from behind Jian Chen. In an instant, the lightning-like bolt of light speared through the second brother's chest. Right where the heart should be, only a hole could be seen. Even after striking through the second brother's chest, the arrow didn't lose speed at all and traveled another 100 meters before smashing into the side of a mountain slope and disappearing from view. Jian Chen turned his head to look only to see the icy cold visage of the yellow-clothed girl. In her hands was the golden lunar bow with the bowstring looking as if it had just been twanged. The second eldest was the one that had first insulted her, and with the girl's personality, there was no way for her to forgive him at all. If the third brother hadn't been killed by Jian Chen, then she would have killed him as well. The second eldest's eyes opened wide as he looked at the golden longbow and the girl wielding it in disbelief. He had never thought that a young and weak-looking girl like her would possess such a terrifying amount of fighting strength. That golden arrow had traveled at a speed far beyond what he could detect. Bang! The second eldest's body fell to the ground, dead. After being killed by this weak-looking young girl, he would never be at ease even in death. Seeing his second brother fall dead, Tian Zhou's face grew alarmed before instantly turning white. Both Jian Chen and this young girl's fighting strength had far exceeded what he had expected. The second and third brother both had a strength that wasn't too far away from his own, but they both had been instantly killed. The most terrifying thing was the arrow that the yellow-clothed girl shot out. They left him in a state of terror. If it had been him that was shot at, there would have been no time for him to dodge since they were so close. He would have met the same fate as his second brother. Tian Zhou immediately halted his forward momentum toward Jian Chen. With this sudden change in development, he was suddenly stuck in a problematic dilemma. Jian Chen turned to look at Tian Zhou with an attentive gaze and taunted, "Were you not saying that you were going to kill me? Just why haven't you done anything yet then?" Hearing this, Tian Zhou's face grew unsightly as he stared at the two with a venomous look. "Brat, Tian Zhou, won't forget this day." With that, Tian Zhou flew in the opposite direction to flee. Immediately pulling at her bow, the girl was just about to shoot at the fleeing Tian Zhou when Jian Chen disappeared from his original position and flew toward Tian Zhou. Halfway to him, Jian Chen's sword flashed in the light as a concentrated amount of sword chi flew at Tian Zhou. Feeling something peculiar chase after him, Tian Zhou flew to the side and simultaneously used his Fire Saint Force enhanced sword to smash at the sword chi he couldn't avoid. With this delay, his traveling speed was much slower than before and so Jian Chen had quickly caught up to him before stabbing at him without hesitation. After being blocked from his escape path, Tian Zhou could do nothing else but fight Jian Chen. With his Saint Force exploding out from his body, the pressure around them began to escalate as the grass below them began to wither away. "Ha!" Tian Zhou shouted. With a heavy swing, his giant sword came raining down on Jian Chen. Without fear, Jian Chen slammed his own sword chi-enhanced light wind sword against the other. Then, with a shake of his hand, the light wind sword slapped the sword, sending the giant sword flying to the side. With a strong amount of power, the sword immediately stabbed deep Tian Zhou's chest before the tip came exiting out from his back. You are an Earth Saint Master? How?" At that moment, Tian Zhou had been brought to full clarity. The person he had never bothered to look at was not a great Saint Master, but an Earth Saint Master. "It's no wonder. No wonder at all that you were able to kill third brother and chase up to me." Tian Zhou's face ashened as he began to feel a great amount of regret. If he had known earlier that Jian Chen was an Earth Saint Master, then he wouldn't have tried to provoke him. "How unfortunate, you learned of this too late," Jian Chen stated emotionlessly as his killing intent went undisguised. Chapter 305, Seeing the ruler armament once more. Tian Zhou stared at Jian Chen with a dangerous gleam. "Do you mean to kill me?" Jian Chen laughed. "This is the consequence of your actions." It was you that started all of this and decided that I was in the wrong, and then you wanted to kill me. Do not blame me for returning the favor. With that, Jian Chen slowly pulled the sword out from Tian Zhou's chest, causing a river of blood to come pouring out. Jian Chen's sword had only pierced through Tian Zhou's chest 2 inches away from his heart. While it had run through the chest, it wasn't a life-threatening injury for a man like him. Knowing that Jian Chen was determined to kill him, Tian Zhou threw away his cautionary attitude and with a serious shout, he roared, "If you wish to kill me, then be prepared to pay a heavy price." Tian Zhou's giant sword burst out with light as a fire-like essence began to coil around his sword. The temperature around the two immediately soared higher as even the grass below began to rapidly dry up. "Go die then." Tian Zhou howled as his sword transformed into a flaming light that came roaring down at Jian Chen. He knew that as long as the strange, longbow-wielding girl was there, he had no chance to escape. No matter where he went, he would die, but he could hopefully drag Jian Chen down with him. Even if he couldn't kill Jian Chen, he would at least deal a significant amount of damage to him. Right now, there was only a month left until this part of the competition was over. That meant that this would be the most intense part of the competition. If he could injure Jian Chen at this crucial moment, then even an Earth Saint Master like Jian Chen wouldn't be able to leave this place without harm. With that single sword strike, a strong pressure flooded the area and pressed down on Jian Chen's body. With this sensation, Jian Chen felt as if he was stuck in a quagmire, and that his own movements had become restricted. Tian Zhou's sword was undoubtedly using a battle skill. Jian Chen sneered. He had seen plenty of battle skills, and had even experienced the taste of a tornado-like battle skill before, so a battle skill like this was nothing. Only if there was no alternative would Jian Chen try to go head-to-head against a battle skill. But he knew he generally didn't have enough power to go against one. Sliding forward, Jian Chen narrowly dodged the sword and swiftly shot his blade forward towards Tian Zhou's throat. Before Tian Zhou could even react, the light wind sword was against his neck. "Even if you try your hardest, your fate won't change. You are not an opponent for me." Jian Chen laughed as he looked dangerously at Tian Zhou. "Tian Zhou, since I am friends with the Tianqin clan, you may give me your final words. You truly dare to try and kill me?" Tian Zhou roared with an angry look. After exchanging several blows, he had already figured out that he wasn't strong enough to fight Jian Chen. Even a battle skill wouldn't be enough to defeat this 20-year-old youth. Knowing that Jian Chen wasn't a great saint master was truly a fact that he found hard to believe. Jian Chen sneered, "Do you really think that just because you are a member of the Tianqin clan, I won't make a move against you? I've already shown enough restraint. If you kill me, the Tianqin clan won't let you go." Tian Zhou began to show a sliver of fear. Jian Chen's glare dimmed as he shook his hand, causing the light wind sword to strike Tian Zhou's face with a slap. The sharp edge of the sword cut slightly into the man's face and drew blood. "You!" Tian Zhou grew indignant as he glared furiously at Jian Chen, yet he made no move to attack him. If looks could kill, then Jian Chen would have been burned to ashes by Tian Zhou's malicious glower. Humiliation. This was the biggest humiliation Tian Zhou had ever felt. As a direct member of the Tianqin clan, Tian Zhou held a clear, decisive role of power and status. Even Qin Shao couldn't compare to his status. But Jian Chen's actions had been nothing better than a slap to his face with his palm. This act alone had almost caused Tian Zhou to explode in anger. "What about me? So what if I kill you? Don't even bother to threaten me with the Tianqin clan. You are not the representative of the Tianqin clan, and if it weren't for the sake of brother Qin Shao, then I would have taught you a lesson back at the Tianqin clan's compound," Jian Chen stated. With a fierce glare, he kicked Tian Zhou in the chest. However, whether it was accidental or intentional, Jian Chen had kicked him where Tian Zhou had been stabbed with the sword earlier. Tian Zhou stifled a groan as he was sent flying 5 or 6 meters into the air before finally crashing back down to the ground. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, his face went as white as parchment as his chest began to flow with blood again. Jian Chen brought out his light wind sword in a flash once more before stabbing at Tian Zhou's throat with a terrifying amount of sword qi. Just as he stabbed down at him, a weak-sounding voice came from behind. Jian Chen, please, don't kill him. In the end, he's my uncle. Qin Shao had somehow awoken during their fight, and had struggled to get to where Jian Chen was, his voice a barely audible whisper. Jian Chen's light wind sword suddenly stopped right in front of Tian Zhou's face, the chilling feel of the sword qi already close enough to touch Tian Zhou's body. There was no fear in his face. After several years of life-or-death fights, Tian Zhou was experienced with fatal events. Death had no effect on him. Biting his lips, Jian Chen stared at Tian Zhou like a starving wolf and growled, "For the sake of brother Qin Shao, I'll spare your life today." With that, Jian Chen recollected his sword before looking at the space ring on Tian Zhou's finger. Jian Chen loftily grabbed the space ring and walked back to where Qin Shao was. Tian Zhou crawled up from the ground with a heavy look as he stared icily at Jian Chen's retreating back. Wordlessly, he tried to address the wound on his chest before walking away. His space ring had been taken, and he had been humiliated by Jian Chen, but there wasn't a single word he could say. Revenge could come later. As long as he lived, he would be able to find an opportunity to wipe out the unbelievable humiliation he had suffered today. The blood-soaked third brother stood behind Tian Zhou with a baleful glare as a large amount of killing intent radiated from him. Jian Chen stopped his movements as he turned his head to look at the third brother, who said you could leave. With a slash of his sword, a burst of sword qi flew at the man. The third brother had already sustained heavy injuries that had taken up the majority of his strength. Thus, he was unable to dodge this blow and was speared through by the sword qi. The originally blood-soaked third brother fell to the ground slowly as more blood came pouring out of the thumb-sized hole in his throat. Tian Zhou shook slightly, but he continued to move away without stopping. Quickly, he disappeared past the mountain ridge. Jian Chen walked to Qin Zhao's side and inspected his wounds before taking the other 2 Radiant Saint Force-filled pills to feed him. No, Jian Chen. 1 pill is enough, give the other one to brother Qin Zhu. Qin Shao blocked Jian Chen from feeding him another pill. Nodding his head, Jian Chen put 1 pill into Qin Zhao's mouth before turning to Qin Zhu and giving a pill to him as well. With a small amount of hesitation, Qin Zhu took the pill into his mouth before closing his eyes to heal. With his innate silence, he had no words to say. Jian Chen walked to where the yellow-clothed girl was and said, "Please look after these 2 for a moment, I'll go collect a few things from nearby." The girl looked at Jian Chen with a skewed look before turning her head angrily to the side without another word. Jian Chen didn't beat around the bush either, and instead looked around himself. Pushing the tips of toes on the ground, he immediately shot off like an arrow into a specific direction before quickly disappearing from sight. Seeing how Jian Chen had finally disappeared, the longbow-wielding girl pouted unhappily as her beautiful face held some anger. Jian Chen returned quickly with a bunch of wrist-sized branches. Setting them on the ground, Jian Chen took out a few piles of rope and some quilts and began to busy himself with them. In a flash, a simple stretcher was made for Qin Shao to lay in. Carefully placing Qin Shao in the stretcher, Jian Chen knew that Qin Zhao's waist had almost been cut in half, making it impossible to walk. Even standing would be tantamount to being impossible, so a stretcher would be needed. "Brother Jian Chen, I'm sorry to be such a bother." Qin Shao spoke out emotionally. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. "Qin Shao, if I am your brother, then don't say such words." Qin Shao grabbed Jian Chen's hands without a word, but his heart was filled with emotions. Grabbing the stretcher, Jian Chen lifted him into the air so the stretcher was at his shoulders. Turning around to look at Qin Zhu, he asked, "Are you able to move still?" After Qin Zhu had eaten the pill with Radiant Saint Force, his body was in better condition than before. While he wasn't completely healed, it was better than nothing. With some effort, Qin Zhu stood up and stared at Jian Chen with a complicated expression. "I've no problems, but I won't be able to fight." However, I'm capable of running. This isn't a good place to idle about, let's go. Jian Chen said. Neither the girl or Qin Ju had any objections to this, and so after taking the second, third, and fourth brothers' space belts, the four of them left the area. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound could be heard as an equally large amount of energy was seen rippling through the air. Jian Chen and the others could even detect that the earth below them was vibrating slightly. Bang 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 bang. From far away, a loud sound and a large amount of energy could be seen and heard. Even the shaking of the earth continued despite the long distance, and had even cracked the ground slightly. Jian Chen and the others immediately stopped their movements and looked at a giant mountain several hundred meters away where they could barely make out the sight of what was happening. There are people fighting over there, they seem quite strong. Jian Chen spoke with a solemn expression. As soon as he spoke, a giant, iron-like seal flew from the mountains before crashing down to the ground. Bang! With a mighty crash, the ground shook violently once more in a stronger surge than before, making it seem almost as if there was an earthquake. That's the seal of Treasure Mountain. The girl cried out in shock. Her face grew solemn as she said, "Sure, Xiangran has to be fighting with someone." Seeing how far back the seal of Treasure Mountain was sent flying, the enemy must be very strong, or else there has to be many of them. At that moment, the seal began to fly upwards back toward the mountain slope. Jian Chen and the other three could see that before the seal could come flying down, another figure flew up into the air with his flaming, scarlet sword smashing against the seal. Bang! Like a clap of thunder, the sound shook everyone's ears as they all saw a ripple of energy fly forth. The seal continued to wobble in midair as it flew back constantly. Ruler armament. That sword has to be a ruler armament for it to knock back the seal of Treasure Mountain so far back. The girl cried out in shock. Chapter 306. Get out. Jian Chen grew solemn the moment he saw the sight before saying, "It would be unwise to approach them now. Let's hurry up and leave." If he didn't have the injured Qin Shao draped over him, then he would have investigated the site above. For the sake of Qin Shao, he would place safety as their priority. Jian Chen took the stretcher and led the girl away from the place as Tian Ju bit his lips and followed close behind. The ground began to shake once more as the mountains shook violently. Even the ground near Jian Chen's feet began to crack as the sounds of a fierce battle could be heard, his ears shook from the vibrations. A few of the more courageous men were attracted by the sight and flew toward the sounds of the battle. The vast majority of them had already lost their space belts and were heavily bandaged while some looked quite miserable. The moment they saw the injured members behind Jian Chen, two of the more well-off-looking men flew at Jian Chen in a hurry. The two were extremely fast and had traveled several hundred meters in a flash. Swiftly coming to a stop to measure Jian Chen and the others, they both noticed that Jian Chen and the other girl were no older than 25 years at the most. Their confidence couldn't help but go up as one of them shouted, "You there, stand still." With that, they closed the distance. Jian Chen's eyes flashed as the girl instantly grabbed at her longbow and shot 2 golden arrows from it. They traveled at an extremely fast pace. The 2 golden arrows traveled through the air with a golden trail as if they were shooting stars that flew closer and closer to the 2 men. When the 2 saw the girl take out her bow, they immediately took out their saint weapons as a precaution. As the golden arrows were shot, they were already waving their swords in an attempt to cut them down. Earth Saint Masters. Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. From the pulse in their saint force, Jian Chen could tell just how strong the 2 were. Bang! Bang! Following 2 metallic sounds, the smoke from the explosions, created when dirt and grass was kicked into the air by the collisions, masked the 2 men from view. The 2 men then shot straight into the air as a result of the energy. They involuntarily spat out a mouthful of blood. While the girl was very young in age, she was very firm in her killing strikes, unlike those born and raised in a sheltered lifestyle. Just like a hardened battle veteran that has experienced countless of battles, she readily stepped forward as her dainty jade-like fingers stretched the bowstring on her bow. Slowly stretching it taut, she immediately let go and released a golden arrow away from her. Whoosh whoosh. Two twangs could be heard as the two golden arrows left a trail of golden light as they shot toward the two men. Before they could even react, the arrows had shot through their chests. Ah! The two men let out simultaneous cries of anguish as they felt a fist-sized hole punch through their chests. As the golden arrows pushed past their bodies, the remnants of the energy exploded within their body and instantly destroyed their inner organs. As soon as the men screamed in pain, they instantly went silent. The two of them were Earth Saint Masters, but they both had been easily killed by the girl and her longbow. Everyone around the area could see this fight clearly. Those who initially had thoughts about robbing Jian Chen and his group instantly withdrew all notions of fighting. Just who is that yellow-robed girl, and how strong is she? The two men who were after their tokens were Earth Saint Masters, but even they were easily killed by her. I can see that this girl isn't that old, but just how could she be that strong in such a young age? Whoever marries her in the future will be truly blessed, Shu. Speak quietly, what if she hears you? If she gets angry then it'll be all over for us once she starts shooting. That's right, a youngster like you should keep your mouth shut. A loose tongue may bring you trouble. Be careful with what you say, and for heaven's sakes, don't say anything unnecessary. From far away, three men began to talk among themselves. Looking at Jian Chen, no one dared come close to him. After that, barely any people dared to block Jian Chen and his group's path. Jian Chen continued to hold the stretcher in front of him while he rushed forward. After he had came across the two who blocked their path, he collected their belongings, a space ring and a nice-looking space belt. The girl watched as Jian Chen rifled through the men's belongings without saying a word. Strapping the longbow to her back, she followed Jian Chen from behind as they both left the place. Shi Xiangran continued to fight for a long period of time, allowing Jian Chen to travel several kilometers away. Even after hearing several explosions, Jian Chen and the group didn't turn back and continued on. 6 hours later, Jian Chen and his group were farther away now and finally stopped at a cave to rest. Within the dark cave, a small campfire could be seen burning. This cave has someone recently staying here, forget it, let's occupy it. Jian Chen muttered before carefully setting Qin Shao down on the ground. Collecting several untouched branches around the cave's opening, Jian Chen lit them on fire to use as a torch. The branches won't burn for long, you should all go inside to rest first, I'll go find some more branches. With that, Jian Chen turned to climb down the slope and collect some more branches and dried sticks. While Jian Chen continued to collect branches, the sounds of footsteps could be heard. Ignoring the sound, Jian Chen continued to collect the tree branches on the ground. Quickly, two shadows flew into view. From their appearances, the two were around 40 years old. One was quite sturdy in stature and wore a black sleeveless gown. Both of his dark-skinned arms bulged with muscles and he wore blue-colored trousers with cloth shoes. The other man was quite even in his build and was not tall at all. His face was rather suited to talk to the crowd but his ordinary-looking eyes shone with light. He wore a white robe that was quite damaged and there were green stains from the grass nearby. As Jian Chen measured the two, they looked at Jian Chen in return. Realizing that Jian Chen was no older than 20 years old, the two men both dropped their guards. Jian Chen looked at the two for a moment longer before he resumed picking up branches from the ground. With a single strand of rope, he tied a bundle of sticks together before putting them in his space ring. Now that Jian Chen was an Earth Saint Master, he had no reason to hide his space ring anymore. His strength was sufficient enough to protect himself, so the space ring he had originally hidden in the Tianqin clan was now worn proudly on his hand. When the middle-aged man saw the space ring on his hand, a barely detectable glint of light flashed through his eyes but his expression remained impassive. The sturdy man took out a wine gourd and began to take a large gulp from it before sighing carefully. Then looking at Jian Chen, he said, fellow brother, you sure are quite brave. With a young and brazen kid like you participating in the gathering of the mercenaries, I truly admire you. Just what are you gathering up branches for? Jian Chen tilted his head to look at the man. He looked simple and honest enough with those clear eyes. I'm using them to start a fire. Jian Chen replied. As soon as all the branches were collected and bundled, Jian Chen stored them into his space ring and quickly left without a look back. As the sturdy-looking man stood where he had been talking to Jian Chen and looked at him run farther away from them before slowly saying, that kid is quite mysterious. Ha, even I think he is quite mysterious too. For a kid this young to participate, he's stronger than me when I was his age. What an admirable achievement. His companion laughed. The man then revealed the tiniest of sneers, Signorin, did you see that on his person, that ring on his finger was actually a space ring? A space ring. The sturdy man gasped with a bitter smile before scratching at his bald head in embarrassment. I wasn't paying attention at all. Yunzheng, I could detect that kid was stronger than me several times over. Despite him having a space ring, a simple space belt is well enough for a person's everyday use. As long as one prepares one in advance, then they will save themselves some money. The middle-aged man didn't say anything and continued to look in the direction Jian Chen ran in. After a little while he left in another direction with the other man. Jian Chen quickly returned to the original cave and immediately took out the branches from within his space ring to begin the campfire. With Qin Zhao's heavy injuries, mobility was severely restricted, so Jian Chen had calculated that they would have to stay within the cave for half a month and wait for Qin Zhao's condition to at least stabilize. For that reason, he had stockpiled a large amount of branches that filled a corner of the cave with a pile of wrist-sized sticks. Adding a few more sticks to the fire, Jian Chen continued to take out some medicinal herbs from Qin Zhao's space belt to treat his wounds and then wrap some bandages over them. At the same time, the equally injured Qin Zhu had taken out a few medicinal pills to swallow before sitting in a meditative state as he closed his eyes to allow his body to concentrate on healing. The girl sat on a rock in a corner of the cave as she gently stroked her golden longbow with a concentrated expression. The entire cave was rather peaceful and only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard. At that moment, the sounds of footsteps could be heard walking into the cave, causing Jian Chen, who was tending to Qin Zhao's wounds, to instantly stop his movements and look toward the entrance. He was already prepared to fight. Although Qin Zhao was in a better state than before, he was in no state to fight at all. With his waist damaged, he was unable to exert much force, so Jian Chen would have to protect him. The girl slowly raised her head as she stared at the cave's entrance as well while clenching the longbow in her hand. Although there weren't many that could challenge her, after seeing Shi Xiangran and the other user with a ruler armament, the two of them were equally paranoid and vigilant. In a flash, two figures entered Jian Chen's eyesight. With the light from the campfire, Jian Chen could see the appearances of the two men. One wore a black sleeveless gown and was quite sturdy in stature that revealed his dark-skinned and muscular arms. The middle-aged man behind him was well distributed in build. They were the two that Jian Chen had seen when he was collecting branches earlier. Get out! The girl commanded coldly at the two. Chapter 307. Being bold. As the two men saw the girl speak, the sturdy-looking man took a look at the beautiful face of hers and immediately stopped right where he stood. Quickly regaining his awareness, he spoke with a depressed expression, "The miss is quite lively. I've traveled for 30 years and yet I've never seen such a vivid woman before. Just what might be your name? I discovered this cave personally and coincidentally someone came in when I just left it. Even then, you are asking me to leave when it should really be you." Then, the man looked around the cave only to quickly discover that one of the people there was the one they had seen not too long ago, Jian Chen. When he saw him, he broke out into a smile. "How coincidental, fellow brother, we've found each other once again." Jian Chen looked at both the middle-aged man and the sturdy-looking man with a sharp stare only to discover that the both of them were Earth Saint Masters. While those who could make the breakthrough from the Great Saint Master realm to the Earth Saint Master realm was only 10%, those who could become an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50 was a 1% chance. Several 100,000 men were participating in this competition, and only a small number of them, that wouldn't exceed the triple digits, would be an Earth Saint Master. Now this part of the competition was finally reaching a conclusion. By this point, the remaining few people that were completely intact were almost all Earth Saint Masters, while a small minority were Great Saint Masters. So it was very rare that two Great Saint Masters would suddenly appear as they did right in front of Jian Chen. Without even waiting for Jian Chen's response, the sturdy man walked over to the side of the caves and sat down with a smile. "Fellow brother, since you have two injured men with you, I won't drive you out. We should all protect each other after all. Since everyone should be lively right now, let's talk about something, don't you think so, Yunzheng?" The sturdy man asked the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man gave a small smile before saying, "Signorin is correct. If no one has any objections, then we should all rest. If we come across any piece of trouble, then we can help each other out. After all, the more people the stronger we are." The middle-aged man sat down next to the burly man and began to look at the four people in front of him. The girl continued to maintain her icy facade as she stared at the two men dangerously. Despite the looks of goodwill on their faces, she didn't plan on dropping her guard. Looking at the girl, Jian Chen hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. "That's fine. We'll share this cave for now, but remember this, if someone dares to harm us in any way, then do not blame me for being impolite." With that, Jian Chen's eyes frosted over as a dangerous gleam entered them when he said his last sentence. Hearing this, the middle-aged man to the side of the burly one grew uncomfortable for a moment. For a Grand Earth Saint Master like him be threatened by a 20-year-old child, that didn't seem right. With it as is, the man could conclude that Jian Chen wasn't an ordinary person. For a person to remain with their space belt for this long in an intense massacre of a competition without any major injuries was commendable. To also look at the two of them with such an arrogant expression, this was someone a person could rely on. The man didn't seem to hear Jian Chen's threat and began to laugh. "I am called Signorin, the man to my side is called Yunzheng. Fellow brother, what is your name?" Seeing the simple and straightforward manner of the burly man, Jian Chen immediately concluded that this man was honest. These type of people normally had no machinations hidden away within them, and even if they had, they wouldn't act upon them. Memories from long ago were suddenly recalled back into his mind as Jian Chen thought about his eldest brother Changyang Hu and Tai Ta from Kargath Academy. These two were very similar to the Signorin in front of him. Because of this, Jian Chen's impression of him was decent. "I am called Jian Chen." Jian Chen spoke with a friendly smile at Signorin. The girl who was sitting on a rock stared at the smiling Jian Chen with a complex look. Not too long after, the cold hard look on her face receded away and was replaced with a rarely seen gentle look. Because of his genes and his cultivation methods, Jian Chen's appearance was exceptionally handsome and could even be said to be perfect. His smile could stun anyone, and there was not a single girl under the heavens that could resist. Even the girl not too far away from him had been dazed a bit. Quickly, she recovered herself and tore her eyes away from Jian Chen to look elsewhere. "Jian Chen, I can see that you are quite young, perhaps not even 25 years old." Signorin asked. Jian Chen gave a small smile but didn't respond to him. Signorin looked toward the yellow-clothed girl and continued to ask, "Little girl, you've grown to be quite beautiful, even I've grown quite astounded. What is your name?" With a snort, the girl turned away from him and leaned against the wall to look at the dusky cave roof. With an embarrassed laugh, the burly man turned to Jian Chen for help. "Signorin, don't bother, her temper is quite bad," Jian Chen smiled. Even he didn't know the girl's name other than the time when Shi Xiangran had called out to her as Luan Er. Hearing Jian Chen's words, the girl immediately whirled around with a furious expression. "You're the one with a bad temper." Signorin stealthily took a look at the girl with a hand scratching his nose and thought to himself, it seems Jian Chen is correct. While this girl is quite lively, her temper is equally large. This isn't a person we should offend. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed as he looked on with a displeased expression. Then, he took out a few space belts with dried blood and a space ring. Whoa, Jian Chen, you've so many space belts. There's even blood on some of them, did you steal those? Senior An looked at Jian Chen with a look of shock and his mouth wide open. Even Yun Zheng, who was sitting right next to Senior An, looked at Jian Chen with some shock and a strange look in his eyes. Jian Chen laughed at Senior An's words and replied, "Is it considered stealing if they tried first?" Under the amazed eyes of Senior An and Yun Zheng, Jian Chen began to take out and classify the items within the space belt and space ring. In total, there were 4 purple cards, 3 Class 5 Monster Cores, 200 Class 4 Monster Cores, 500 Class 3 Monster Cores. There was a small mountain of money that shined with purple, gold, and even silver lights. There was also a small pile of around 400 tokens lying about. Seeing the pile of black-colored tokens, Senior An's eyes immediately zoomed in on it and nearly began to drool as he muttered, "Wah, there's so many tokens." Even Yun Zheng had been moved by such a sight as his heart began to beat wildly. Jian Chen didn't lift his head up from the pile and began to divide the items into 2 smaller piles. Storing them within a space belt, he handed them to the girl and said, "Take it, these are yours." The girl stared fiercely at Jian Chen as she took the 200 tokens from within the space belt into her own. Then, she threw the space belt back at Jian Chen and said, "The other things in here are of no value to me." Without any more objections, Jian Chen took the remaining items into his own space belt. The 2 purple cards, 2 Class 5 Monster Cores, 100 Class 4 Monster Cores, and the pile of money, he didn't think that the girl would be so rich that she would disregard this wealth of items. Senior An stared at the space belt thrown at Jian Chen with some disbelief and swallowed the saliva building up in his throat with some difficulty. Turning to look at the handsome Jian Chen, his bald head thumped against the walls of the cave continuously in regret. Why couldn't I have been born a few years later? Ah! Why couldn't I have been born handsome? I've only just figured it out, if one is born handsome and popular, even the beautiful women will take the initiative to give the good items to you. Senior An continued to mutter to himself as if no one was around. The girl sitting on top of the rock began to heave up and down in anger while trying to pretend to ignore the man. But her eyes continued to shoot fire as she stared maliciously at him. Sitting right next to Senior An, Yun Zheng looked at Jian Chen and the girl with a sluggish look. Seeing how the girl acted shocked his heart. 2 purple cards, 2 Class 5 Monster Cores, 100 Class 4 Monster Cores and a large sum of money was not an easy thing to give away. This sight was far too much for him. The items in that space belt were an abundant amount of wealth and would even tempt an Earth Saint Master. It would appear that despite the age of these 2, they are not people of ordinary status. To be able to toss around a Class 5 Monster Core, they must belong to powerful people and hold powerful positions. The man thought to himself. Chapter 308, Yun Zheng's shock. Time flew by. Jian Chen and the group of people camped in the cave for 7 days. In that time, Jian Chen, Senior An, and Yun Zheng continued to talk among each other in a good-natured manner. The yellowed-clothed girl rarely spoke. Even now, Jian Chen still didn't know her name. Qin Zhao's injuries continued to slowly heal, and while the cut mark on his waist wasn't completely healed, a small scab was already forming. With the help of some medicine, another 10 days would be needed before he could walk. Even Qin Zhu's injuries had healed sufficiently enough for him to fight. With his valiant strength, it would take another few days for him to heal completely. Within the dark cave, the fire that had been burning incessantly danced slowly. By the side, the sitting Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes and looked around the room. Qin Zhu, the girl, and Senior An were all sitting in a meditative position and Qin Zhao was still laying on the stretcher with his eyes closed in a sleeping position. Only Yun Zheng was not in the cave. Jian Chen restoked the flames before walking out of the caves. A while after he had left, the yellow-clothed girl opened her eyes from her meditative position and scoured the place. Then, closing her eyes, she went still again. Arriving at the cave's entrance, Jian Chen began to take in the fresh air of the outside world before closing his eyes in a pleased manner. The ventilation within the cave wasn't the best, and the stuffy, hot air within the cave caused everyone inside to feel uncomfortable. Taking in another deep breath, he climbed down the mountain slope to wander about. Since he had to protect Qin Shao, Jian Chen didn't dare go far. Until Qin Shao was fully healed, Jian Chen didn't plan on leaving this place. If they were to travel with an immobile Qin Shao and came across a strong individual, then it would be very problematic. Even if he wasn't afraid for himself, but if the target was Qin Shao, Jian Chen would be stuck in a problematic situation. In this short amount of time, Jian Chen had collected a total of at least 1,000 tokens. The competition had only required a total of 500 tokens in order to pass, so Jian Chen was well above what was needed. The only thing left for him to do was survive for the rest of the time limit. Jian Chen leaped into a 30-meter tall tree and sat on top of a tree branch. Laying down on it, his head continued to think about the Ming Dong who was still within the hidden shrine. I wonder how Ming Dong is doing. His ancestor was good friends with the Shrine Lord, he will definitely help out Ming Dong. When I see him again, he'll definitely be vastly different. This gathering of the mercenaries is the easiest way to obtain a heaven-tier battle skill. As long as I try my hardest, then I will definitely obtain it. When I am strong enough, I will be able to return to the Jessen Kingdom and settle my debt with the Huayun sect. With a heaven-tier battle skill, the Changyang clan will definitely increase in power as well. Muttering to himself, Jian Chen continued to lay about on the tree as he stared up with a determined look. Shortly after, Jian Chen let out a breath of air with a worried look. The Jessen Kingdom is currently in a bad situation. The neighboring 4 kingdoms are uniting against them. Within 2 years, there will definitely be a war between the 2 sides. Before that happens, I must increase my strength as much as possible and be of some help. As Jian Chen continued to plan for the future on top of his tree branch, the shadows of 3 men quickly flew toward his direction with the speed of an arrow. From the 3 men, the frontmost person was especially pale and drenched with blood. His originally white robes were heavily stained with blood as the 2 men behind him chased him with their saint weapons ready to strike. Sensing the 3 men, Jian Chen pushed aside the foliage in order to see just what was happening from his overhead perch. Just as he looked at the 3 men, he revealed a surprised look before smiling. I didn't think that he would be chased in such a manner. It seems that he plans to bring them back to our campground. With that, Jian Chen leaped down from his tree branch and stood right next to a tree in front of the 3 men. From the 3 men, the person running away was the same person from the caves, Yunzheng. At this moment, Yunzheng was in a miserable state and had long since lost his svelte attitude. The moment Yunzheng noticed Jian Chen, an indescribable light flashed in his eyes before increasing his speed a bit. Flying toward Jian Chen, the pale Yunzheng began to breathe heavily as he took refuge behind him. Brother Jian Chen. Let's hurry up and run. These 2 men are too strong, let's go and get Seniorin to help deal with them. Jian Chen shook his head with a smile. My brother is currently resting inside, I don't wish to shock him. But, Yunzheng held some reluctance in his face, but he said no more after that as Jian Chen held his hand up. I'll deal with this matter here. Hearing Jian Chen's calm attitude, Yunzheng slowly began to calm himself down before standing quietly behind Jian Chen. He wanted to see just how strong of an Earth Saint Master Jian Chen was. The 2 men chasing after Yunzheng came to a stop several meters away from Jian Chen. The 2 looked to be around 40 years old and both wore blue robes that did nothing to hide their bulging muscles. One of the men was quite short and looked to be around 5 feet tall with dark skin as black as coal. The other man was rather skinny looking and had an average appearance with a bent nose. On the left side of his face there were several intersecting scars that destroyed his face. His face was rather terrifying to look at, but it also increased his intimidation factor. The 2 men sized up Jian Chen as they looked at him. Giving each other a small look, one of the 2 immediately walked up to Jian Chen before pushing him out of the way. Jian Chen wrapped his hands against his chest before smiling at the two. Fellow brothers, what might you two be doing? Seeing the expression on Jian Chen's face, the short one began to feel annoyed at him. Without another thought, he glowered at both Jian Chen and Yun Zheng. If you know what's good for you, hand over your space belt at once or else, Or else what? Jian Chen continued to smile. The short one glared at Jian Chen with an even more cruel stare before roaring, or else you two will die here today. In an instant, Jian Chen released a large amount of killing intent. Is that so? Then allow me to send you on your way. With that, Jian Chen disappeared from view before reappearing in front of the short man. At the same time, his light wind sword immediately came into view before the chilling cold sword Qi stabbed at the short man with blinding speed. The short man hadn't expected for Jian Chen to make such a sudden move so quickly. Before he could even react or dodge the sword strike, the silver sword had already stabbed straight through his throat. Jian Chen's sword was far too fast. In an instant, the short man had been caught off guard and killed. Even as an Earth Saint Master, it was still impossible for him to dodge Jian Chen's strike. Without stopping, Jian Chen immediately pulled out his bloody sword from the short man's throat before disappearing from view once more. In an instant, his sword flashed as it flew at the other Earth Saint Master. At that moment, the Earth Saint Master hadn't reacted yet as he stared in horror at the incoming Jian Chen. Then, it was with a serious look that he had realized this youth he had disregarded earlier was in fact a tiger wearing a sheepskin. Ha! The man roared as his saint force exploded out of his body. The saint weapon in his hand began to flood with a blue-colored light as he slashed at Jian Chen. Jian Chen's figure blurred as he dodged the other man's sword. His light wind sword became a silver glow of light that flew at his throat. Reacting quickly, the man tilted his head to dodge Jian Chen's strike and allowed the sword to slip past him. However, the sword swept past his neck and a small cut appeared on his throat. As the man was starting to rejoice, he suddenly felt a stinging sensation on his neck. Before he could even look down and see what happened, his head was immediately cut off. It spun through the air before falling back down to the ground as his headless body fell to the ground with blood flying everywhere. These two men were strong enough to force an Earth Saint Master like Yun Zheng to flee, but in an instant, they had been killed in a single strike by Jian Chen. That made Yun Zheng open his eyes wide in disbelief and shock at what had just happened. This type of strength, was this really something a 20-year-old youth should be able to possess? Standing to the side of Jian Chen, Yun Zheng tried to breathe in and out in order to calm himself. Although he knew that Jian Chen was already an extremely terrifying Earth Saint Master, he didn't think that the two men that were chasing after him would be dealt with in a single strike. Despite this fight happening right in front of his eyes, Yun Zheng still couldn't believe it and thought he was dreaming. This was an illusion and not reality. It completely toppled over what he knew as true. As a traveler in the continent who had painfully cultivated for 30 to 40 years before finally making a breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50, this was already an achievement that could be considered to be a genius. Those who became an Earth Saint Master before the age of 50 were all well-known experts and geniuses of cultivation with a bright future. Right now, two Earth Saint Masters were killed by a youth that wasn't even 25 years old. This was a massive blow to Yun Zheng, and as such, this was the very first time that he had felt that this world was truly unfair and absurd. Chapter 309, Immortal's Cave. After dealing with the two men, Jian Chen collected the space belts of both Earth Saint Masters. Turning their bodies aside, Jian Chen didn't see anything else of value on their bodies. While these two were Earth Saint Masters, aside from their robes and space belts, there wasn't any space rings to be seen. Space rings were treasures within the Tianyuan continent that were symbols of status and power. Although Earth Saint Masters were qualified to have a space ring, not all of them had one. Jian Chen looked at the bloody Yun Zheng and spoke to him, "Let us go back and treat your injuries. Walking out here with injuries isn't a safe thing to do." The two then left the area. Yun Zheng watched the slowly disappearing back of Jian Chen with some remaining shock. Before he had even blinked, Jian Chen had killed 2 Earth Saint Masters. Something like this would give him an everlasting impression of Jian Chen. Could he be one of the rumored geniuses? Yun Zheng sighed before running to catch up with the receding figure of Jian Chen. The two figures returned to the cave where the bloody figure of Yun Zheng attracted the attention of everyone. The one friendliest to Yun Zheng, Signorin, stood straight up with a furious expression. Yun Zheng, what bastard did this to you? Tell me, and I'll go tear them limb from limb. Seeing just how concerned Signorin was, Yun Zheng smiled faintly. I had some bad luck. When I was hunting, I came across 2 Earth Saint Masters. But fortunately, Brother Jian Chen came along and killed them both. Hearing Yun Zheng, Qin Shao who was lying nearby stared at Jian Chen with a surprised look before turning suspicious and doubtful at Yun Zheng's words. Jian Chen, is what he says true? You were able to take down 2 Earth Saint Masters by yourself? Qin Shao spoke with an expecting tone. Sitting nearby, Qin Zhu's ears shook slightly, but his eyes didn't open. Jian Chen nodded his head, but gave no response. Qin Shao took on a pleasantly surprised look as he spoke with some excitement. Jian Chen, just how did you grow to become so amazing in such a short amount of time? When we first initially fought, I knew that you were already amazing, but I didn't think that you would be able to kill an Earth Saint Master so easily. That is because during the time I left the Tianqin clan, I managed to make a breakthrough to become an Earth Saint Master. Jian Chen replied. Hearing that, Qin Zhu's eyes snapped open as he looked at Jian Chen with shock. Even as his eyes opened, he remained as still as a statue. So it was like this, Qin Shao spoke with some understanding. Time went by in a flash. Soon there was only half a month remaining in the competition. In that time, Jian Chen had rarely ventured out and spent the majority of his time within the cave and silently protected Qin Shao. The yellow-clothed girl had used her Lunar Bow to make a new cave for her to privately cultivate. Signorin and Yun Zheng both constantly walked outside and came back to the cave with bruised bodies the majority of the time. A few of the times, they had been chased down by several strong Earth Saint Masters back home, where Jian Chen would promptly deal with them. The power that Jian Chen would constantly display always reminded Signorin and Yun Zheng of his strength. Those of the same cycle were miles away from Jian Chen's level. Second and third cycle Earth Saint Masters were not an opponent for Jian Chen at all. Not too long after, Jian Chen had unconsciously become the pillar for Yun Zheng and Signorin. After several more days, Qin Zhao's body had been completely healed. Almost as if he had provoked Jian Chen's ire, Qin Shao immediately set himself about to cultivate as soon as he was healed with the assistance of monster cores in order to reach the Earth Saint Master realm as soon as possible. As for Qin Zhu who had healed even earlier, it was almost as if he cherished words like gold. Ever since he had met Jian Chen up until now, he had never said more than 10 words total. This had made him even more quiet than Katafei back in Wake City. In the quiet cave, only the sounds of the crackling fire could be heard inside as the light constantly flickered. Jian Chen sat in a meditative position in a corner of the cave with a Class 5 monster core in his hand in order to absorb it. With the Jessen Kingdom on the verge of danger and the Changyang clan as well, he had to hurry up and increase his strength. There was no time to squabble around and waste time. Within the dark cave, everyone was cultivating, causing the leaking energy from the monster cores to gather within the cave. It was as if the cave was originally filled with this energy and was paradise for cultivators. At this time, the sounds of rapid footsteps could be heard. Jian Chen's ears shook slightly from the sound, but he made no movements to get up from his position. The footsteps grew closer as Signorin and Yun Zheng both entered. Jian Chen, I've news, good news. I've heard from someone on the outside that there is a cave to the south of the forest that used to have a senior cultivator in it. There's treasure inside, and I'm willing to bet there's at least one heaven-tier battle skill. Signorin spoke out hurriedly. The moment Jian Chen heard the words heaven-tier battle skill, he instantly snapped open his eyes. Although everyone was cultivating within the cave, in this sort of condition, they remained vigilant to the outside world. Not even the subtle and sudden gust of wind would be able to escape their notice. Qin Zhao's eyes widened as he said, "Heaven-tier battle skill. Are you sure that's right? What if some enemy was trying to announce false news and later set up a huge trap for everyone?" Seniorin shook his head, "That I don't know. But many people are already heading on over there. I've heard that even the 5 experts are going there." 5 experts? What 5 experts? Qin Zhao questioned. The 5 experts are men with a very well-known reputation and are also the strongest men around. In a short amount of time, practically everybody and everyone knows their names. Yunzheng spoke out to Jian Chen. While he knew Jian Chen was strong, he didn't know whether or not he was stronger than the 5 experts. Jian Chen's heart skipped a beat. Who are the 5 experts and what are their names? They are called Qin Ji, Dugu Feng, Tianmu Ling, Shi Xiangran and Jieda Wukong. TL note, Qin Ji is not from the Tianqin clan. Jian Chen narrowed his eyes slightly at the mention of one of the names as he muttered, "I've no idea that he would covet these treasures or even be called one of the 5 experts." "Jian Chen, shall we go or stay?" Qin Zhao spoke, clearly showing that Jian Chen was the leader. Jian Chen hummed to himself before saying, "We are going." Standing up, he spoke again, "There's no time to waste, we have to go now. There's only 15 days of the competition remaining." Afterward, Jian Chen led Seniorin, Yunzheng, Qin Zhu and Qin Zhao out of the cave while the longbow girl coincidentally flew out from her cave as well to follow. "I've heard there is a heaven-tier battle skill in the southern caves. We're going to go investigate, do you want to come along?" Jian Chen asked the girl. For a moment, the girl's eyes rested upon Jian Chen before nodding slightly without any more words. "This time, we may come across our dear old friend, you should prepare yourself," Jian Chen said. With that, the 6 people flew out of the caves toward the south. On the way, Jian Chen noticed plenty of people rushing the south as well. With information about a heaven-tier battle skill being left behind in a senior cultivator's cave, every single person was rushing on over. These men were primarily great saint masters with a small bag to hold their possessions on their backs. Their space belts had long since been taken from them aside from a few sets of clothes and food. For these men without tokens, the Earth Saint Masters wouldn't bother them any longer unless there was some sort of deep grievances they had between each other. So these great Saint Masters could travel on the road without any major fears. Occasionally, there would several fights that broke out among foes, but those did not impede Jian Chen's group at all. Many of those who saw Jian Chen's group were quite smart. When they saw the colorful clothes and the space belts that swayed with their bodies every step, each one of them could guess that the people with Jian Chen were all extremely strong. They traveled for 5 days when Jian Chen and the group finally reached a dense forest. In this location, there were several groups of competitors that were all here to see if the information was accurate or not. "I've heard that there are several extremely strong magical beasts guarding the cave. Even the 5 experts and around 30 Earth Saint Masters fought several times without a chance of success of entering the cave." "That's right, I've heard there were several battles, and some of the Earth Saint Masters already died. Only 3 of the 5 experts still remain untouched. The magical beasts guarding the cave are too strong. If it goes on like this, then I'm afraid no one will be able to enter the cave before the time is up. Nothing is guaranteed just yet. Right now the secret of this place is already leaked. Haven't you seen the never-ending stream of people coming here? Just wait for the 5 experts to all assemble, then they'll be able to enter." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.